Hi everyone. Good to see you on my channel today. Today I will tell you a wonderful story. It is full of love and kindness. I hope you enjoy it and I wish you an enjoyable viewing experience. Thank you.
Jason stepped out onto the balcony. He had rarely been outside lately. Unless the weather was neither too hot nor too cold, the man looked out over the tops of the sleeping trees. Buds were already waking up in some places. Spring had sprung. Soon his wife came out to him. "I'm going into town. I have an appointment with a beautician," she smiled and poked her husband on the cheek. "Okay," he replied without much interest. "If it works out, be back by 3. The doctor's coming in today." "I'll try." "That's it. Bye." Jason watched Emily get into a red Mercedes and drive out the automatic gate. His malaise had turned into a real sickness. Someone shouted to him from the street, "Leave the old cherry tree alone." There are almost no buds on it, all fallen off, he showed with his hands. "First her, and then me," Jason whispered to himself to remind himself that he didn't have long to live. Over the past few days, the man had been thinking more and more about how he had taken a wrong turn once in his life. Yes, he, like everyone else, thought that happiness was in the money. He put a lot of effort into becoming a big man, and then it all came crashing down in an instant. "Your liver's failing," the doctor told him at the time. "You need serious treatment." And he was treated for 2 years, but there was no improvement. Jason was feeling better, and then he was getting worse. It wouldn't have mattered if it wasn't for the constant pain. It was unbearable. His liver was checked many times with tests and biopsies. No cirrhosis was found, but the organ refused to function normally. The day came when Jason stopped trusting conventional medicine. A good friend recommended an old Chinese man who practiced acupuncture. "Oh, it's bad," the grandfather said, examining his eyes. "Liver's all bad." Jason shrugged. The old Chinese man fussed around him, inserting needles in various places. The patient cried out in pain. "Be patient," the grandfather said. In a way, the Chinese man helped him get to a stable level from which there seemed to be no escape. Sure, Jason was fading, but not so fast. The grandfather did perform a miracle, but unfortunately the cure never came. Almost 6 months passed after that, and Jason was just waiting for his turn. "I wish I could live to see the fall," he muttered. "I want to remember this summer so much." He pressed his forehead against the glass, glanced at the clock. Hannah was supposed to be here now. Jason wasn't hungry, but he needed to take his pills, and they weren't supposed to be taken on an empty stomach. And sure enough, 2 minutes later there was a knock on the door. The landlord invited him in. "Jason, I brought you breakfast. It's 10, the girl smiled. "Good, Hannah." He took a seat at the table. "Thanks." He remembered the gratitude as the girl deftly began taking dishes from the tray. "It's nice outside." He sipped the water following the pills. "It's warm today, just right for spring. Can you feel it?" Joyful Hannah replied. "John said he'd be sawing the second cherry tree, but he asked me," the landlord replied. "If it's withered, what good is it? Maybe the weather will get better. Will you go outside then?" Maybe. He sighed and started on his breakfast. Hannah went out. Jason preferred to spend his meal alone. Half an hour later, the maid came in, cleared the table, and he lay down. Here it is, the summation of 20 years of struggle. The feeling of superiority, the joy of being able to achieve something in life, he reasoned. You can't take anything to the other world. That truth is so simple, but for some reason no one thinks about it. Jason remembered himself at the age of almost 30, an energetic, young man who would stop at nothing to get his way. He was quickly noticed his tongue in cheek. Beautifully spoken words became Jason's calling card. But along with this, he had a big problem. The chief's wife fell in love with him. She was in her 40s, but she was still as fresh as ever. When Jason was young and thought that life existed to get something out of it, he started having an affair with Jessica. It was like the woman had lost her mind. She was willing to do anything for a guy, even leave her husband. For a year, their passions boiled like red-hot lava. Jason was sure he'd met his woman too. To be fair, Jessica had helped him. She had some good connections and had helped his wife start his small business. He quit his job, but with it went his passion. Or rather, the chief's wife had grown cold to him. Maybe she was feeling emotional because she felt threatened, or perhaps she wanted to punish her husband in this way. Nevertheless, Jason was at first very worried that his beloved had left him, and then he saw the possibilities. In return for his love for Jessica, he got a small electrical store and some money. That was enough to get him started. After about 4 months, Jason came to his senses and looked around. It seemed to him that he could move on. So he did. His store expanded. Within a couple years, he was already competing with the average retailers in his town. Of course, he made connections, paid whoever he needed to pay. In general, in 10 years, Jason was already a pretty solid man with a good profit. He didn't want to get married. It was enough for him that he was constantly changing his partners. He valued his freedom very much. Besides, his position required that his wife be a real lady, at least in appearance. That's why Jason didn't marry for the first time until he was 45. Then Amber seemed to him the best candidate. Despite her 22 years, she looked like a woman with dignity. That appealed to Jason a lot. He didn't mean to, he just liked women who could present themselves, show strength and their worth. He sighed. He felt like he was a completely different person back then. "John, I've already sawed the cherry tree," the man told him. Yes, the girl sighed in the same way. "John, I feel sorry for him." She hugged her husband. "Jason is a kind man." "That's true." He stroked the girl's head. "I'll be sorry to leave this place." A year and a half ago, a couple came to this town to earn money. By some miracle, they'd managed to get into Jason's house. His wife didn't want them, and she was too arrogant, but the owner insisted. He liked these young people. They seemed open and friendly. And the husband and wife turned out to be hard workers. "I don't want to leave here, either," Hannah said. "We're so lucky to have him. And I'm used to the house. I think Amber will kick us out when he dies," John said sadly. The mistress never hid her dislike of the servants, especially the girl. The young people did not know where she came from or where she was born. But rumor had it that Amber was also from the common people, a bit of a self-promoter for the role of the society lady she played all the time. She was beautiful. She was almost 40 and looked about 10 years younger. Why she and Jason didn't have kids, the couple didn't know. Nobody did. Someone just kept coming up with more and more theories. John left. Hannah started cleaning. They had a gardener working at the house. He usually started his season in mid-April and finished in the fall. Michael worked twice a week. Then there was the cook and his assistant and another cleaner. John and Hannah lived with Jason all the time. The rest of us had our own work schedules. The beginning of April was very warm indeed. Hannah put her face up to the sun. She was 23. Like anyone her age, she dreamed of having a house and children. That was the purpose of her and John coming here. Of course, they'd already saved some money. But it wasn't enough to buy a house in the city. Jason's house was in the suburbs. It was quiet. If the servants needed anything in town, the owner's driver drove them, or they took a cab. The old grandfather had long since retired, but he would come by his former master's request with his car and do his job professionally. Even at such an advanced age, Hannah didn't notice how quickly the time flew by. She stopped when the doorbell rang. The doctor must be here, she remembered what her host had told her, and ran to meet him. The doctor said hello. He and Jason exchanged a few words about the weather, and he headed to the second floor. Jason was already prepared. There was one thing that confused him. Amber never showed up to talk to the doctor. An hour later, the guest left the patient's home and went to his apartment without much emotion. "Yeah, nothing's changed," Jason said with frustration. Then there was no hope. He lay down, his mind reeling with thoughts. But what hurt him the most was his wife's neglect. He closed his eyes. A young Amber stood before him. Oh, how beautiful she was. They'd been introduced to each other at a rich man's birthday party. Amber was single. She was friends with the birthday girl's daughter. The girl chose her friends very carefully. You could say that Amber made up every move she made. She hadn't barely escaped the small town to go back there. Only a big city with prospects appealed to her. Amber relied on her looks. She always looked good. She was willing to spend the last of her money not on food, but on cosmetics or accessories. Of course, on Amber constantly drew attention not only young people, but also middle-aged men, even those who were already in age. But she was waiting for her prince on a white horse. The three young men killed themselves, kneeling, swearing eternal love. But Emily remained quite indifferent to them. Two of them had good prospects in the future, but that was not enough for the girl. She wanted a ready-made option, so that the man of her dreams was fully provided for. He didn't have any problems, and she would agree to such a man. To such a man she was not sorry to give herself. So Amber waited. And that day she finally met him. After meeting him, her friend whispered in her ear who Jason was and what his condition was. To Amber, her words were like a balm to her soul. She was fine with it. She kept catching glances from her new acquaintance and playing along. She didn't want to miss the opportunity, especially since he wasn't married. After this meeting, the man invited Amber to an expensive restaurant. They got to know each other better. The girl deliberately did not want to immediately let the man near her. They dated for about 6 months. Then they started having an affair, and with such passion that Jason immediately asked her to marry him. How much I dreamed of her, made plans, dreamed of children, Jason said. But it didn't work out. In fact, everything he dreamed of back then never came true. 2 years later, Jason finally realized that his self-control hid a basic lack of decency. Amber was too cold for family life. She didn't want children, and she was always busy with herself. He was ashamed to admit to himself that he'd made the wrong choice. His wife wasn't the right person for him, but he couldn't break off the relationship. Jason was too proud at the time to admit his mistake. As time went on, Amber lost interest in her husband. They lived separate lives, nothing to connect them. A couple of times the husband tried to talk about children, but Amber immediately stated that she would not give birth. The reason for her decision she did not explain in any way. "I don't want her to get all my inheritance," he whispered. "She hasn't earned it. It's enough that she's lived as she wanted all these years. Never paid for anything. I'll write a will for some orphanage or hospital for the seriously ill like me." After the wife neglected her husband that day, he took great offense to it. Amber didn't work anywhere. She could easily reschedule her appointment at the beauty parlor, and there was no need for her at all. "She doesn't need me. Why lie to myself?" I was hoping that after she found out about my illness, at least something would change in her. But no, Jason thought. People like her have no sensitivity to others. They're like parasites, selling an imaginary benefit, but in reality, all they do is live at other people's expense. The man's anger began to break through. What is it about her that makes her act like that? Nothing. She's a stupid fool. You can't even talk to her about serious topics, simply because her brain is so underdeveloped that it only revolves around a couple areas in life. Emily is cunning, but now I see how primitive her cunning is. Meanwhile, Amber walked out of the beauty parlor. She was pleased with the treatments she had gotten. She thought her face looked better, and she looked good in general. She was the type of woman who had no passion for intimacy with men, nor did she enjoy romance. Amber was cold and calculating. No, she never cheated on her husband. For one reason only: she wasn't interested in sex. She didn't desire anyone. Maybe only once when she was young. Then Emily was madly in love with her classmate. For his sake, she was ready for anything, but he chose another. The girl decided that in her life there would be no more feelings. Behind the outer mystery, there was a dislike of men. And Emily did not like children. She would not go to the point of giving birth. She cared about her figure, and she didn't need a child. The whole meaning of her life was all about herself. The woman jumped into the car. She remembered that the doctor was coming to see her husband today. So what? Lately, she'd been wishing it was over. Amber was becoming the sole heir to Jason's fortune. And then she was planning a reorganization in the house. "I think he's already left." She glanced at her watch. She didn't feel like showing up home early. She pulled up in front of the large 2-story house. There was no doctor's car at the gate. Amber sighed contentedly. It was so hard for her to play interested in her husband. And then there were the constant doctor's visits. She walked over to Jason without enthusiasm. "How'd it go?" "Amber, I asked for you to be present." Her husband replied sharply. "You don't have to act like that. Your face is gray. Do you want to take out your anger over the doctor's words?" She calmly replied. "Jason, I am not to blame for your illness." His wife turned around and walked away. "You idiot," her husband shouted after her. "But that's it. I won't feel sorry for you anymore." Amber didn't hear his words. She didn't care what her husband wanted her to do. The last time she talked to the doctor, he'd given Jason 6 months. The woman didn't want to waste any energy on him. "You bitch. I'll baby you all." Jason couldn't calm down. His liver ached again. He gasped for breath. It seemed to him that Amber, the snake that had taken up residence in his organ, had eaten his entire liver from the inside out so that all he had to do was die. The disease quickly put everything in place. What Jason had kept from himself for so long became obvious. In the 2 years of his illness, Amber had confirmed all his hunches. What had he been counting on? Why did he think he'd be the one to melt this woman's heart? After all, throughout history, many men had tried to do it, but none had succeeded. "Beauty that kills," he scolded. Amber could be called an insidious killer. His wife didn't want to stay home for long. Besides, she knew her husband was nervous the day the doctor arrived. She changed her clothes and decided to hit the boutiques. The woman didn't waste time for lunch. She wanted to stop at her favorite restaurant. She got into the car, inserted the key. The car started to hume and then stalled. She did this several times. The Mercedes wouldn't start. "Shit," the landlady blurted out. She got out, opened the hood. She didn't know anything about cars. John was watching from the side. He finally took pity and came over to her. "Can I help you?" The guy smiled. Amber looked at him unhappily. John didn't wait for an answer. He looked under the hood, rolled up his sleeves, started picking at the Mercedes. "Amber, try it," he shouted. She sat down behind the wheel, and oh, miracle. The car started. John's eyes lit up. Amber never thanked him. The guy stayed standing, and she quickly drove out the gate. Building through himself, he reprimanded himself and went to wash his hands. He was a little offended. The mistress could have thanked him for his work, but it was beyond her dignity. Amber twisted the steering wheel nervously. Everything annoyed her. She wanted to throw out all those maids and make her own rules. After her husband's death, she'd planned to have a recruitment contest. Everyone had to be beautiful, have refined features, and a good figure. In general, her servants had to resemble Hollywood stars, not country simpletons. Amber stopped downtown in front of the mall. This was where the most expensive boutiques were located. The woman smiled in anticipation. She was a regular customer, and had already accustomed the salespeople to how she should be treated. Immediately, a beautiful young woman ran up and began to favor her. An hour later, the customer was satisfied. She picked up 2 large bags and tapped her heels to leave the boutique. And then her favorite restaurant was waiting for her, and so were the familiar waiters. A young man bustled in front of Amber and complimented her every now and then. The woman bathed in his attention. She liked such moments. The only thing she didn't like was when someone crossed the line and started talking about personal matters. The guests glanced around. The decently dressed gentlemen were looking at her intently. Amber smiled contentedly. There was still a charm about her that attracted the eyes of the opposite sex. It was from a man sitting at a neighboring table that Amber's waiter brought Amber a very expensive wine. "Thank you," she blushed. "Thank him for me, and please let him know I'm married." Apparently the man regretted very much having spent so wantonly. He quickly paid and left the restaurant. Amber sipped the expensive wine with pleasure. It was really great. She really didn't want to go home. They rarely talked to her husband on the phone. Was Amber getting used to her single life as much as she could? Yes, not only did she not suffer from it, she longed for it with all her soul. Amber drove into the yard. It was already dark. She glanced at her watch. The little hand was almost to 8. John was doing something in the yard. Amber, as usual, decided to walk by. "Ouch," the boy suddenly exclaimed and squeezed her hand. Amber stopped in hesitation. "What? Are your fingers frozen there?" she asked and walked over to John. He showed a bloody finger. "Okay, I'll get your wife now." "She's gone," the young man said faintly. "Would you mind bandaging my hand?" "And I, either with disdain or arrogance," replied the landlady. The situation was not arousing any positive emotions in her. "Please, we need to treat the wound." "Please," the young man uttered. Amber and John walked to the kitchen. He showed them where the first aid kit lay. Amber's dress was too expensive to ruin. She bandaged the guy's arm from a distance. "Thank you," he thanked her, though the bandage the hostess made wouldn't last long. The woman left everything on the table and went to her room. She was tired of it all. "I wonder if she even has a soul," John uttered through the pain. "She's not even touched by human suffering." Half an hour later, the wife arrived. She rebandaged her husband's arm, stroked his head to quiet his pain. "I don't know how she decided to do that at all," Hannah said in amazement when she learned that Amber had done the bandaging. "Yeah, I asked her several times before she agreed," he sighed. "How does he even live with her? I mean, she's a heartless woman. I'm the one who's so lucky to have you." He kissed Hannah. "You're my gold." Hannah herself realized how lucky she was to have John. He didn't drink. He didn't smoke. He carried her in his arms, literally. John was a great guy, and he was willing to work hard for his family. That night, the young people talked about their masters for a long time. They fell asleep after midnight. Amber did her evening ritual. She stopped by Jason's house and said goodnight. Her husband didn't say anything back. He was very angry with his wife. He thought Amber had crossed all the red lines. She was treating him like he was dead in front of him alive, showing her lack of care and interest in her husband too openly. Jason decided to call his lawyer the next day. He was going to divorce Amber. With those thoughts in mind, Jason fell asleep. He really wanted Amber to finally be punished. He realized that he had raised this snake himself and fed it all this time. But as the saying goes, "I bred you, I'll kill you." The next day, Jason was visited by his lawyer. Anthony was a young professional, but had bailed out the owner so many times that he didn't want to change him. "Good afternoon," Hannah opened the wicket. "It's been a long time since you've been to our place." "Oh, Hannah, I'm always busy," laughed the young man. "And how are you doing?" "How's John?" "We're all right," narrated the girl on the way to the house. "We're worried about Jason. Believe me, it's not a personal interest. We're very lucky to have him." "Yeah, Jason's a good man," Anthony agreed. "Well, see you around," Anthony waved as he walked up to the second floor. I cheered the landlord. "Thanks for coming on short notice." He hugged his guest. Jason had often told the lawyer that if he had a son, he wanted him to look like Anthony. "Well, I'll drop all business for you," Anthony cheerfully replied. "I hope the doctors have reassured you." Unfortunately, no, Jason interrupted him. "I'm too serious to keep dreaming. I called you in to talk about my wife." The conversation was a long one. Half an hour later, Hannah brought them tea and dessert. Still, the men were still unable to come to any common ground. "You see, if you divorce her now, she'll take some of your property. And it doesn't matter that she never worked and lived off you. I suggest you write a will." Jason really wanted to get rid of his wife, maybe just to get back at her. He envisioned Amber leaving his house with nothing. But Anthony's arguments were too convincing. "Okay," he exhaled. "I don't know how I put up with her. I wanted so badly to die in peace and quiet." It wasn't easy for Jason either. He set himself to kick Amber out. "I need to think about the will," he said at the end of the conversation. "Anthony, I'll call you then." In his 32 years, Anthony hadn't often met such reasonable and honorable clients. Besides, Jason was dear to him in a human way. "Will you be long tonight?" Hannah went to see her guest off. "Is Jason doing well?" He smiled crookedly. "So Hannah, was good to see you." He held out his hand to the girl. Hannah sighed sadly. Anthony had always been kind to them, didn't discriminate because of education and connections, and they were simple people. "Yes." Hannah didn't leave for the kitchen. The cook asked her to help him clean up. "The helper's gone with the driver to the market." "There she is. Look at her." The cook reprimanded angrily when they saw the landlady in the window. "No hello, no goodbye. How long have I worked here? I feel like I'm a mop, not a human being. Not once did she ever talk to me properly, but how to start a scandal if she's in a bad mood? That's the only thing she's always for." But lately, Amber hadn't touched anyone. She was waiting for her husband to die. "And then we'll all roll out of here," the man sighed. "I'm sure she won't leave any of us behind." Amber went outside to work. John, the gardener, hadn't gone to work yet, so she had to do his tasks. "Hey, you come here." Amber suddenly called out to him. John hesitantly walked over to the car. "I think I have something knocking. Can you listen to it? I don't want to drive to the shop today." "I can," the boy hesitated. "Only I've got to drive," he added unhesitatingly. The hostess moved into the passenger seat. John squatted behind the wheel. His hands nervously gripped the steering wheel. He pressed the pedal, and the car drove smoothly. Then John added gas, listening for a strange sound. The car jerked, and the driver barely swerved to the side. Amber collapsed on top of him. "We need to look." Pressed the brakes on the young man. "I wouldn't advise you to ride her. How am I supposed to drive it now?" Amber wondered. "Can you take me to the shop?" I protested something immediately. The guy inside might have misgivings, but he silenced his inner voice and smoothly drove the car toward the highway. Amber didn't speak to John the whole way. He pulled into the shop. The foreman immediately stated the cause of the breakdown and told him to leave the car. "Is that a cab fare for you?" Amber handed the guy the money. The amount was more than he needed. Their eyes met by chance. "John," he barely spoke. "Thank you." The young man had never thought his mistress could behave like the fact that she had given him 10 times as much as he needed for the cab seemed to him first a coincidence and then a show of gratitude. "She has given you so much." Hannah could not believe her husband. "I can hardly believe it." "Hannah, who cares?" He hugged her. "We need to think about us," and he put his hands on her stomach and about our baby. "I'm so afraid to tell anyone that I'm pregnant yet," she said excitedly, "or the landlady will fire us early. I'm not worried about Jason." "But Amber, yeah, maybe she's not really as bad as we think she is." Her husband shrugged. God knows what's on her mind. The incident with the car had somehow gotten Amber closer to John. At least he was no longer afraid of her. 2 days passed. The landlady showed up in the yard with her car. John was hobbling nearby. For the first time in all this time, the landlady called his name. "Come here." The young man dropped the rake and headed toward her, going over in his head the options of why she was calling him over. "Look at this," Amber smiled. "I'm going to ask you to put your hand over hers." All right, he stammered and got in the driver's seat. A moment later, the engine hummed. John listened intently. Everything seemed fine to him. He drove back and forth across the yard for a couple of meters. Amber sat next to him. But what? Questioningly, she looked at the guy. You think everything's okay? John nodded. The woman quickly pulled a wallet out of her purse and slipped him $5,000. You don't have to, he denied. It's not like I did anything. But Amber put a finger to her lips to silence him. Smiling contentedly, she got out of the car. John stared after her. He couldn't understand what was going on with his mistress. No one knew about it except Amber. By some coincidence, she suddenly looked at her employee and saw that he looked a lot like her classmate Peter, her first love. It was then that her car broke down. What moved Amber then? Lost feelings of happiness, curiosity, or a desire to experience a long-forgotten feeling again. But the woman felt strangely drawn to this young man. She couldn't lie to herself. That day, it was as if some valve had opened in her that had been blocking her breath all these years. She just wanted to fly. Amber, overjoyed, went back to her room, her heart singing. She opened her closet, looked in the huge mirrors. She was pleased with the way she looked. Pretty girl. She winked to herself. Why? Do I have the right to have fun for once in my life? She laughed loudly. The woman's eyes burned like a cat's eye, a devilish fire burned in them. Amber took off her hairpins, unraveling her gorgeous hair. Why waste such beauty? After practicing her seductive face a couple times, she reached into her closet and began trying on her many outfits. She had a goal now, and she was going to do whatever it took to fulfill it. No one and nothing could stand in her way. Amber had wanted a man's love for years, craved it passionately. Her blood was boiling in her veins, and she was ready to get John by any means necessary. Unfortunately, the latter had no idea that he was now a red rag for his mistress. Perhaps if the young man had been more experienced with women, he never would have fallen into this trap. It was almost 10-0 when Amber looked out the window. It was the third time. John looked around. There was still no one in the yard. But where is she? He thought angrily, when she doesn't have to hang around there forever. His thoughts were cut short because Amber appeared. John grabbed his bag lightning fast and ran downstairs. Amber was carrying some old boards. Can I see you? She waved her hand at him, and he came right over. Not really. He didn't like that. This was the second time the landlady had given his wife money. And John was glad of it. It seemed he deserved a little extra on his paycheck. Good morning. The young man smiled broadly. Do you want me to take a look at your car? No, I want you to come with me. No, she said in a beautiful voice. I need your help. The woman added more softly. Okay, I'll just warn my wife. John answered her and ran to Hannah. She gave him a stern look. She really didn't like the whole thing. But if I say no, God forbid, she'll fire us. What would we do then? Her husband looked her in the eye. All right, she said through her tears. Please don't show your face to her again. I don't like all this very much. John raced back with an arrow. Amber was already on her way, waiting for him on the street. She'd only thrown her passenger a few words. He didn't seem particularly eager to talk to her. She threw him a questioning look. You want to know where we're going? To the store? She laughed. I need a loader today. Okay, John said timidly. What do you need to haul? Furniture. He encouraged the conversation. No, my new clothes. The landlady kept her eyes on him. The boy froze in his seat. He didn't know how to react. Maybe it was a joke. Nevertheless, he agreed and fell silent. The car stopped outside a shopping center. Amber started rummaging through her purse, pulled out an expensive cell phone, and ostentatiously got out of the car. As she did so, her body bent so that John had a chance to see all of her rounded form. The guy blushed. Let's go, Amber smiled. I definitely can't do this tonight without you. She winked enigmatically at the young man. John felt out of place. They walked into an expensive store. Amber showed him a seat. He took a seat. Then the hostess began to pick out clothes, accompanied by a counselor. What do you think? John heard a voice as if from far away. He was completely immersed in his thoughts. Standing before him was Amber in a gorgeous dress. She had let her hair down to complete the picture. Her shoulders were bare. Good, bewildered the young man. I'm sorry, I blushed. I'm not good at this, he said. You just tell me, do you like it or not? Amber demanded. John nodded. I'll take it right away. she told the salesman. About 10 minutes later, she showed up in her new outfit. John wanted to get up and leave, but the hostess grabbed his arm just in time. "Stop," she commanded. "It's a job, so sit and watch. I'll pay you for it. Cash motivation." There was a little less of the pragmatic John's fervor. The hostess's second outfit didn't appeal to him. "Screw it." She laughed and handed the salesman the clothes. "We'll take the next one." So in almost 3 hours, John had chosen only 3 outfits for his mistress. "And you have good taste." She complimented her assistant when they had already gotten into the car. "Well, John, such a thing. We should celebrate." Before he could object, Amber steered the car toward her favorite restaurant. "To good taste," she raised her glass. John sat looking around. Richly dressed people were eating everywhere. He sat in his work clothes and looked rather silly in his eyes. "Don't worry so much," Amber took his hand. "I'm my own man here, so no one will say anything about you. I'm sorry, but I have to get back. I have a lot of work to do." Tried to walk away, John tried to leave. He was ready to go home and at his own expense. "Eat first and then I'll call you a cab," Amber said seriously. In this, she didn't fool him. The guy was already getting in when she touched his arm. "Thank you," she pressed her fingers lightly against his palm. "It was really nice spending time with you." John quickly slid into the cab, his hand burning with fire. The young man sensed the danger that came from his mistress. All he wanted to do then was run away from her, but John was constantly haunted by her scent. "What does she want from me?" he thought as he sat in the cab. "I'm not her errand boy. I work in her house. But I'm not a slave. Besides, I have a family." John gave Hannah the money she had paid him today. "Mistress so much," she repeated in confusion. "John, what have you been doing?" The wife became even more agitated. "Were you carrying her bags?" He answered unhappily. "Can I come to my senses? Her store makes me dizzy." John decided that the next time the landlady approached him, he would refuse her at once. Let her do what she wanted with him, even kick him out. Amber returned home and walked over to her husband. He said hello through gritted teeth and pretended he didn't want to see her. "Okay, have a good night," she smiled. "I hope this night will be your last," she thought to herself. Emily was lying in her bed and John was standing in front of her. She was frantic to see him. She needed him. "What can I think of tomorrow?" she thought. "Gotta show myself in all my glory. All my life I've dreamed of this boy." She wasn't embarrassed by the age difference or the fact that John was married and his wife worked in her house. It was like she'd lost her mind. She needed him now. "I want him," she whispered and smiled sweetly. "After that idiot dies, I'm going to live here with him. I'll kick everyone to hell. I'll hire a decent maid, and he'll stay with me." Since the woman dreamed of Hannah. She was up most of the night. She was having mood swings and insomnia because of her pregnancy. She went out into the yard. It was cold, tangled in her jacket, sat down on a bench in the garden. "I'll talk to her," Hannah decided. "There's no point in dragging my husband back and forth. I may be thrown out, but I won't let her play with my John." The next few days were very hectic and the lawyer came again. He and Hannah talked a little. The girl didn't know that time the landlord had written a will for all his property to a foundation that dealt with seriously ill children. Hannah fiddled with the master that day. He looked pleased. In fact, Jason was very happy that he would punish his negligent wife in this way. He had no idea at the time how drastically things would change. Jason asked her to stay with him for a while. Meanwhile, Amber approached John again. He looked at her unhappily. "I don't feel well," she whispered. "Could you take me to the hospital, please?" "Yes, of course." The young man jumped up to her and took her hand. He got behind the wheel, and the car started slowly toward the hospital. John kept glancing at his passenger the whole way. Amber did look pale. "Are you okay?" he asked her. She nodded. "I'm okay. Shouldn't we call an ambulance?" "No," Amber waved her hand. "I'll be fine." She was flattered that John cared so much about her. The guy helped the woman up to the doctor's office. He nervously paced the hallway when she came out. He immediately asked how she was. The landlady reported that she was better. She actually got a blush on her cheeks. "I'm craving ice cream. And to go for a walk," she suddenly asked. The guy parked outside a small cafe. Amber was almost healthy by now, ordered an ice cream for herself and for him too. She ate with great relish and told him something. John looked at her in bewilderment. His hostess looked like a little girl and laughed all the time. And she is pretty. A thought flashed through his mind. If I had met her before, I would certainly have paid attention to her. It was as if she had read his thoughts. We are all different when we are young, she sighed. I would like to feel carefree and free again. What gave you that feeling then? John asked her. He was interested in talking to the new Amber. You wouldn't believe it, she laughed. We went out on the town a couple times a year, and the first place my parents made sure to take me was the carousel. Yes, he laughed, but it's very easy to organize. There's a nice park here and you can ride the merry-go-rounds. Then let's go. Amber jumped up and grabbed his arm. Before John knew it, they were on their way to Central Park. Amber was driving. She was thinking about something the whole way. John looked at her and couldn't figure out what was wrong with her. Her cell phone rang. I'd be right there. It's a little chilly, he said. Come on, I'm here on business. Are you with her again? Hannah shouted into the phone. But John had already hung up. The guy didn't want to lie to himself. He was enjoying the company of his landlady. They rode 3 different kinds of merry-go-rounds, until Amber got dizzy. All right, that's enough, she said in a commanding voice. Let's go home. She got behind the wheel, and they headed toward the suburbs. But halfway there, the woman pulled over and began kissing John passionately. To his horror, he didn't resist. I love you. She pulled away from his lips. My boy, I promise you will be happy with me. John was silent. He refused and asked for a ride home. Amber realized that she needed to take things step by step. She stopped at the beginning of the street and drove off again. She was insanely happy. She really wanted to get to the most important part, but it was necessary to make John fall in love with her enough that there was no turning back. She was too careful to mess it up. John went to bed, but he didn't give his wife all the money his landlady had paid him today. He put most of it away in a stash. Hannah fell asleep, and he couldn't sleep a wink. Amber's happy face was in front of him. The guy felt like he'd never experienced anything like it before. With Hannah, they were more like friends. Their family life was based on very simple principles. But Amber was overwhelming him with new emotions. He wanted to run somewhere. Perhaps the word inspiration could describe his state of mind. The next day, John woke up and felt goosebumps running down his back. He was insanely anxious to see his mistress. He deliberately did something in the yard, and Amber still wouldn't come out. She was watching him from the window, and she liked the fact that he was always looking around. Satisfied, Amber walked over to her husband. She was in a good mood. Jason, does my approaching death cheer you up so much? Amber said, instead of greeting her husband. Jason, I want to take care of you. Do you? Amber played. She stood for a moment and left his room. Maybe she was up to something, he wondered. I know her too well. I'd seen her like this the last time I'd asked her to marry me. Jason was 65 years old, and he had a good grasp of human psychology. She must have found a man, he concluded. But, he smiled, don't even think you're getting anything. Amber went back to her room and changed. Tonight she was going to shine. She felt the climax was near. Good morning. John came running up to her. If you need any help, just let me know. Yes, after lunch, she said casually. John, I need you to come with me to a place. He touched his lips and tasted again the kiss that had been left on his lips from yesterday. Amber just wandered around the stores and had breakfast at a cafe. She was already itching to meet John, but she waited. Yes, the best room ever, she confirmed. E40 p.m. please, 2 o'clock. Stopping by the house, she picked up her boyfriend and asked him to load some things into her car. Hannah stood watching her husband run around the yard. Husband, I'm going to have a good coven tonight. The girl headed toward the landlady. Amber is going to get me now. You and all these things are in the workshop. There are people to pick them up because she's going somewhere. I don't know, he lied. Hannah stopped, kissed her husband on the cheek, and headed into the house. And John, satisfied, sat down in the front seat. They were pulling away from the house when Amber threw the steering wheel and passionately pounced on him. This time, the guy was actively participating as well. Half an hour later, they were already at the hotel. Amber didn't care what anyone thought of her. She and her guest went up to the room. There was already champagne and fruit on the table. To a good evening, she raised her glass. I hope we have a nice time. John's whole past life just faded away. It seemed to him he simply hadn't lived before. The contrast was so huge that the guy dissolved simply in his passion. Such a storm of emotions he had never experienced before. Amber stroked his head and said affectionate words. John lay there with his eyes closed. "Why did you choose me?" he suddenly asked. "Especially since I'm married." He turned to her. "Because you're different," laughed the hostess. "And also because I love you. I think we're made for each other." "What about Hannah?" He suddenly remembered his wife and blushed. "What's going to happen to her now? She'll be all right too. She'll meet her happiness. It's just that we won't say anything to anyone yet. As soon as my husband dies." She fell silent. But John understood what she was trying to say. At that moment, he was so lost in unreality that he couldn't even guess who he was or where he was. He was so caught up in his passion that he couldn't see his life without Amber anymore. Hannah seemed to sense something wrong right away. First of all, she didn't like the smell of champagne. John very rarely drank, mostly wine at the holiday table. "John, what's wrong?" His wife asked in excitement. "Have you been drinking?" She kept her eyes on him. "That's enough," he pronounced. "Can you imagine my luck today?" One was introducing himself about his wedding. "The guys poured me a glass, too." "All right," Hannah said with resentment in her voice. "John, I'm scared. I think something is going to happen." She pressed herself against her husband. "Yeah, it's going to be okay," he kissed her, but only Amber was present in his mind. What John wanted then? It's hard to say. He was generally living in some sort of fantasy world at the time. He thought of nothing but his mistress. The main thing was that she promised him that everything would be fine, and how he was not interested. The guy also did not think that even if the master died, Hannah had to leave this house if he stayed. Where would she go with a child? "I'll give her all the money," he decided to himself. "Maybe Amber will add some of it too, so Hannah can buy her own house." That was the end of John's thoughts and plans for his life. As long as Amber was with him, the rest didn't matter to him. 2 weeks passed. Hannah felt coldness from her husband. From the experience, she was put on conservatorship. That's when everyone, including the master and mistress, found out she was pregnant. "I don't care." Amber tried to keep her cool. In reality, she was really angry. "You're still going to stay with me, aren't you?" She covered her face with her hands and cried. "What's wrong with you?" John put his arms around her. "I only love you. Do you want me to tell Hannah all about us?" "No," she answered at once. "Let my husband die first, and then I'll tell her everything myself." A little over 3 months passed. Jason decided to walk to his room where he used to conduct his business. It could have been called a study. Its windows faced the high neighbor's wall. There was almost nothing to see there at all, except a couple of trees under the window. The man spotted 2 people, took a closer look, and almost shrieked. Amber and John were standing against the wall where no one could see them and were kissing passionately. "Oh, shit," Jason scolded. She's completely out of her mind. "You crazy fool. Hannah's going to have a baby soon." At first, the owner wanted to call his wife in and make a scene, but then it would have been revealed that he'd robbed her of everything, and she'd have nothing when he died. Amber could instantly file for divorce and take a decent chunk of his estate. What am I going to do? He pondered. God, what a pity, Hannah. Poor girl. That's right, it dawned on him. Jason called Anthony at once. He arrived a couple hours later. Wow. The man was surprised to see Hannah's belly. I didn't know you were having a baby. Congratulations. Thank you. The girl stroked her belly. Anthony, it's been so long since you've been here. We miss you already, she said. I promise I won't be missing you again, he laughed. The girl led her guest to the host. He asked for tea to be brought to them, and Hannah set the table and left. Anthony, I'm asking for your help in a very delicate matter. The client's voice trembled. The lawyer looked at him intently. He had no idea what Jason was about to say. I want to sign my house over to Hannah, he said abruptly. We can do that. We need to get Ashley and her husband involved, Anthony clarified. He began to think of different options in his mind. Though on her specifically, the host replied dryly. You see, it was painful for him to talk about it. Anthony, my wife is having an affair with John, he admitted. I don't care. I've got one foot in the grave. Hannah, on the other hand, has had some bad luck. How so? The guest opened his mouth in amazement. She's pregnant. I saw her today. That's the problem. She doesn't seem to know anything, he sighed. Anthony, I want to help this girl. Besides, I feel kind of guilty about her in a way. But you didn't put your wife up to her husband, did you? The man threw angrily. Wonder if he fell for her in the hope of getting your property. The lawyer felt like cursing, but he had long ago been able to keep his temper in check in such situations. Bastard, he whispered as he walked to the window. What's going to happen to her now? The man was quiet for a moment. He liked Hannah. She was like a pure tear. Oh, and John seemed like a decent guy too. But right now he was ready to punch him in the face. Okay, he approached Jason again. Bring all the paperwork over tomorrow for her to sign. I want to leave her some of the money, the man added. She'll have to raise the child alone. Anthony came downstairs. He was all pale. Hannah came up to him at once and smiled cheerfully. What's the matter with you? The girl said involuntarily. Is Jason doing so badly? No, he suddenly took Hannah's hand. It's going to be okay. He ran his other hand through her hair. We'll see each other again soon. Anthony was acting strange somehow. He didn't usually take such liberties, though the girl sensed his behavior as a friendly gesture. It seemed to her that he knew something that she certainly wouldn't like. While John was saved by the fact that his wife was pregnant, she wouldn't let him near her. She got into moods easily, so he tried to keep his hands off her. No, have you seen her today? The wife said suddenly. Dressed up like a doll. Walked past Lauren and me, flashed a grudging smile, left. Who? Emily. John blushed and corrected himself. Amber. Anna somehow didn't notice it. Yeah, well, playing the hell out of it. The wife replied grudgingly. She's not worth a damn herself, is she? I don't know. John wanted to avoid the conversation. John, Hannah, screw her. He waved his hand. Let's go to bed. 2 or 3 times a week, John went out for a couple hours on a coven. His master would let him. Hannah didn't know her husband went to Amber's hotel. He always brought back good money he supposedly made when he returned home, so up until that point, Hannah hadn't questioned any of it. But 2 weeks after Jason wrote the will for the house, the thing Hannah had been dreading happened on her. John went into town for work. Hannah got a call from the health clinic telling her to come right away. There was some kind of test missing. Either the girl had forgotten about it last time, or she hadn't been scheduled for it. She managed to get out of the office in time and headed for the exit. Realized she couldn't take public transportation. I'll stop by the market, she thought, and then I'll call a cab. The bazaar was 50 meters away from the polyclinic. It was hot. It was approaching September. The girl stopped in the shade of a large store, sitting on a bench when she heard joyful voices. Hannah thought the man's voice sounded familiar. She turned around. There was a familiar car in the back row and beside it. Oh my God, she almost fainted when she saw her John kissing Amber and quickly jumping into the car. Hannah's trembling hands tried to press her husband's number, but he didn't answer. The girl began to pant from the stress. Her stomach felt like it was squeezing. Calm down. She ordered herself and breathed deeply. It's all right. I was just imagining it. She needed to get home and she would be safe there. She lay down on the bed and cried bitterly. That's how John found her. Rushed to his wife at once. She could not say anything to him for a long time. I saw you, Hannah said at last. Did you kiss her, John? That's why. She turned her face in. All the more for her, the husband was silent. He couldn't look his wife in the eye. I love her, he finally said, breaking Hannah's heart in half. I can't live without her. Oh my God. The girl covered her face with her hands and cried even more. What about me? What? John didn't answer her. He ran out of their room. The girl got out of bed and, as lost, went up to the second floor. She beat her fist with all her might at Amber's. You bitch. She screamed at the whole house. You stole my husband. Get out. A moment later, the door opened and Amber appeared in the hallway. At first, the grin stayed on her face, but then the woman became seriously frightened. Hannah clawed at her hair and they began to fight. Amber had one big advantage. She wasn't pregnant. Jason came out screaming. He realized what was going on. The whole house was buzzing. Before he could get to Hannah, she shoved Amber as hard as she could, sending her flying down the stairs. John showed up in the doorway as well, helping his mistress up. Hannah walked up the steps. Jason was in great pain from the excitement and could barely make it down to the first floor. No, Hannah blocked the car her husband wanted to leave with Amber in. John quickly ran out, pulled her aside, and the car drove out the gate and into the street. No, Hannah sobbed. John? And everything went black in her eyes and she blacked out. When Hannah came to, she realized she was in the hospital. She started to feel her stomach in terror. The baby was still there, and she sighed. Half an hour later, a nurse came to her, and in the evening Anthony appeared in the room. He tried to speak as calmly as possible. Jason couldn't make it, and he wasn't feeling well either. The girl turned her back to the wall, crying. The pain was unbearable. The lawyer waited a few minutes. "Hannah, I have some very important and bad news to tell you," he finally said in a trembling voice. Hannah turned to him abruptly. There were tears in her eyes. Anthony waved his hand. He wanted John to answer for everything, but not at this price. "Was Jason dying?" Hannah asked. "No, it's not about him," Anthony answered, and then he was silent again. It was too hard. "Did John and Amber crash?" Hannah persisted. "No," she shouted across the room. A man ran up, pulling her against him. Someone brought cold water. "Did he make it?" After a few minutes, she asked. Anthony shook his head negatively. Hannah became really hysterical. She was given an injection and fell into a dream. "God, it hurts so bad," Anthony whispered, stroked her hand. Before leaving the room, Jason lay on his bed and cried. He really hated to end his life like this. Of course, he dreamed of getting rid of Amber, especially after she seduced Hannah's husband. But that she'd done it, he had no doubt. As the investigator had told him, John had been driving, stressed out of control. They went full speed into the ditch. The car was thrown high into the air, flipped several times. Both of them died on the spot. Jason felt he didn't have long to live. His nerves were on edge. The events of the last few days had taken the last of his strength. He wanted to go to Hannah, but he couldn't even get out of bed. He realized that he still had to get through the funeral. He would naturally not be able to go to the cemetery. In fact, all these matters were now handled by Anthony. He contacted Gregory's parents. He had to tell them everything. His father and mother took him in themselves. They didn't want to make a big deal out of it. No one came for Amber. So Anthony had to organize everything himself. Daniel was admitted for observation. Of course, she was in her 8th month, and there was still a chance that if she didn't make it and gave birth, the baby's life could be fought for. But the doctors did everything they could to make sure she carried the baby to at least 8 months. The tone was very strong. Somehow, Jason made it to the day of the funeral. In the evening, he was taken to a hospice for the critically ill. Anthony was torn deciding his affairs. He drove to the hospital to see Hannah. She was also visited by the boys. The cook kept sending her normal food by courier. All in all, everyone sympathized with the girl. "Congratulations." Anthony held out a huge bouquet to Hannah and blushed. He had come to pick her up from the maternity hospital himself. Hannah didn't realize the change that had taken place. After his wife died, Jason had written a deed of gift for the share. She was now sole owner of the house. Everyone already knew about it except her. "It's such a shame we don't have Jason with us," the girl said sadly. "He did so much for me." "Hannah, believe me, he did a lot more for you than you realize," replied the lawyer enigmatically. "I'm very glad you've come to your senses." In passing, he threw in, "Anthony, thank you too." She touched his shoulder. "You've turned out to be a true friend." The lawyer lowered his eyes. He had liked Hannah for a long time. He certainly didn't want to take advantage of her today. The car pulled into the yard, and there were already guys standing outside. Hannah gave her son to Anthony and began to hug everyone. The man was afraid of the baby at first, but then began to stroke him lovingly. "Wow, Anthony, you look just like his daddy," the cook joked. "He let me take a picture of you." Everyone went into the house where a large table was set up. Hannah put her son in the stroller. He was sleeping soundly. Anthony asked her to talk to him alone. Everyone knew what he was about to say to her. "Hannah," the man looked her in the eyes. "This house belongs to you now. Jason has deeded it to you, holding out all the necessary paperwork," you said. "I don't want it that way." "May," Hannah immediately protested. "Anthony, let him come back. I'll make sure he spends his last days in joy. I don't want anything from him," sobbed the girl. "He'll be here in about half an hour for the papers." He cast a glance at Hannah's cell phone and paced nervously around the yard. Finally, someone honked. and the gate opened. A special car that transported the sick drove in. Jason was sitting in a wheelchair. Hannah immediately rushed to him and fell to her knees in front of him, kissing his hands. "Please stay," she begged him. "We need you. I need you, my son." Hannah sobbed. Jason couldn't help himself. He wiped his eyes now and then. "Are you like a father to me?" She hugged the man. "I will take care of you until your last breath. Please make me happy. All of us." All of his servants crowded around the former master. They all looked at him with eyes full of pleading. The decision he had to make was a very difficult one. The man had already let things go and wanted to leave quickly, but Hannah gave him hope, albeit briefly, but still happiness. Jason's attending physician had agreed on one condition only. He now had round-the-clock care from 4 nurses who rotated constantly. Hannah would bring the baby to Jason and place him in her arms. He was overjoyed. In fact, it was Hannah and her son who prolonged his life back then. Yes, it was only 4 months, but it was a kind of happiness Jason had never felt in his entire life. With Amber gone from the house, it was as if the tension was gone as well. The housemates were having fun at work, and all of the staff visited Jason every day. They talked to him, sometimes having tea together when he was able. Hannah really kept her eyes on her beloved Jason. Despite being a small child, she fussed around him all the time. Very often, perhaps 3 times a week, John also came to visit him. It was as if he, too, had become a full member of their extended family. "So," Jason said, "John, I don't have much time left. I want to leave everything to Hannah. Let her decide what she wants to do with all my money." "Hannah is a bright person," John replied at once. She doesn't want your money. She's taken over your house." "I mean, John, she's like a daughter to me." He wept. "I really want her to have a reliable man in her life." Once the lawyer blushed and lowered his head. Jason almost jumped out of bed. John, he couldn't believe his hunch. The man kept his eyes on him. "Yes, I've been in love with Hannah for a long time," he admitted honestly. "Only she doesn't know anything about it." That night, they had a serious man-to-man conversation. Jason was sure of John, so he would have married her to him immediately if she'd agreed. It was late when Jason called Hannah back to his place. He had decided to have this conversation, after all. "Hannah, daughter, look at me closely," he said to her. "There's something I'd like to ask you. It's about John." Hannah was confused. Her heart was pounding frantically in her chest. She was afraid to even think about what Jason would say to her now. "You're a grown woman, and I don't want to tell you what to do," he sighed. "But if someone asked me what kind of husband I'd want for you as a father, I'd choose John. Hannah, he loves you. And he loves your son too. For nothing. Not because you're the heir to a great fortune. I think I love him too." She lowered her eyes. "John is a good friend. He's reliable." "That's good." Jason cheered. "Daughter, listen to me. You're going to be happy with him. I can feel it. It's a well-known fact that people in my condition are very intuitive." The wedding wasn't lavish, but it was attended by everyone close to me. The bride and groom's parents came. Everyone was happy. Early the next day, Hannah walked into Jason's room, and the nurse was asleep. She immediately realized that something had happened. His body was cold. Hannah at first wanted to scream out in pain, but she glanced at her former master's face. He was smiling like an angel. That's how happy he was buried. Arriving at his ex-wife's house a year after the divorce, her husband froze upon learning of her fate. Amanda ran to the kitchen sink and splashed the coffee she had just drunk from a cup. "Catherine is messing with me again," the woman thought with anger and despair. "Stop hitting her with a belt," Amanda said out loud. She had woken up this morning in a good mood for once. It was Saturday, the whole weekend was ahead of her. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering lazily where the sun bunny had come from. She didn't immediately realize that it was a mirror lying on her bedside table, on which the rays were falling. How quiet is the house? Amanda wondered. It was 10 o'clock. John and Catherine should have been up by now. She planned to go to the mall and buy herself the pants she'd been eyeing on the store's website for a while and pick up some clothes for her stepdaughter. Afterward, she and her husband could spend the day together. Amanda turned on her side and saw a note from her husband gone on business. Urgently summoned. But John won't know when he'll be back, she thought. Why does he have to be the one to be pulled on weekends? If the boss himself had traveled like this, he would not have sent others. Her husband was the deputy head of a large construction firm. He often personally traveled to the sites, including on weekends. This dampened Amanda's mood a little, but she tried not to give in to sadness. The woman threw a robe over her nightgown and went down to the first floor. In the kitchen, she boiled water in an electric kettle, poured ground coffee into a cup, and poured boiling water over it. John wouldn't fail to remind me that there's a coffee machine in the house, Amanda smiled. But it was nice to be able to make coffee the old-fashioned way, like when I was a student. She covered the cup with a saucer and went to the bathroom to wash up. Amanda decided to take a shower and stood under the cool jets for about 10 minutes. Then she returned to the kitchen, looked out the window and smiled at the sunny summer day that promised only good things. But it was a sip of coffee that ruined everything. Apparently, while I was in the bathroom, Catherine came into the kitchen and put something in the drink. Amanda pondered. What kind of nasty stuff did she find? Was it black pepper or Brooklyn? She had no desire to taste the liquid a second time. She emptied the cup into the sink and sighed. Her mood was hopelessly ruined. For the 6 years that Amanda had lived with John, she had tried to find common ground with Catherine, his daughter from her first marriage, but she had failed. And it all started with their very first meeting, when a man brought his then not yet wife, but the woman he loved, to introduce his 9-year-old daughter. I had one mom, and I do not need a new one, said the girl, turned around and went into the room. Will she get used to it? John then divorced his hands. It's been 3 years since Mary died. She misses her. You know, Amanda said. A child is attached to her mother, and I'm not her aunt yet. That's all right, her husband replied. But it didn't happen. When the woman offered to go with the girl to the children's park to spend time together and get acquainted, she seemed happy at first, but then throughout the walk was terribly cranky. I'm dizzy. I feel sick. I don't want to feed them and I don't want to eat myself. I don't want ice cream either. She refused even her favorite treat. John and Amanda were a little confused by her behavior, so they came home and tried to have dinner together. My stomach hurts, Catherine said, and retreated to her room. So it went on. The girl perceived the new woman of the father exclusively in the bayonet. The man, on the contrary, only dreamed of meeting a new love after several years of lonely life after the death of his wife. So smart and beautiful, he said of Amanda. And they met in a public restroom at the train station. It's a shame to tell this story, the woman laughed later, recalling the situation. But she was not laughing then. In February, she came from her district center to the big city, where she found a job. The bus ride took her only 2 hours, so there were no sanitary stops. By the end of the trip, Amanda had a terrible urge to go to the bathroom. She jumped out of the vehicle and almost ran to the bus station building, but ran into a closed bathroom door. The restroom was closed for repairs, the note on it said. The nearest one was in the train station building. What the hell is this? The woman exclaimed in frustration. But there was no way out, and she hurried toward the train station, which was nearby. To get there, she had to pass through a small square, then go down into an underground passage, where people in a hurry were also pushing and literally stepping on each other's heels. God, couldn't the stations be connected somehow? Many people change from train to bus and vice versa, she muttered to herself. She was sweating in her down jacket from the fast walk. Strands of her brown hair were poking out from under her hat, and the suitcase she was dragging behind her looked like it was going to tear her arm off. Already barely tolerable, Amanda walked into the building and saw the huge lines. The women's restroom. And it's in a train station. However, the toilet is working. One of the people standing there was indignant. There were no people in front of the men's. Amanda, disregarding propriety, opened the door, saw a vacant stall and ran in without thinking. The woman slammed the door shut behind her with a jerk and finally went to the bathroom. Whooshish, she sighed in relief and smiled. That incredible feeling of relief. And then she saw that she hadn't closed the latch on the stall door. But it didn't matter, because luckily no one was trying to get in from the other side. The woman pushed the handle and pushed the door open to get out. But it wouldn't open. The handle didn't go all the way down. Amanda jerked on it some more, but to no avail. "What kind of bad luck is this?" she said aloud. "Madam?" came a voice from the next stall, a little surprised to hear that woman's voice. "But do you need help?" Very much, Amanda ventured, embarrassed. "I think the lock's jammed. The knob won't budge." Just a second, she heard the sound of water running from the stall. "Okay, now my hands are blistered. I'll think of a way to get you out." Amanda heard the sound of water running from the faucet, then the sound of a zipper being stretched, and then some rustling. "Found it," the man said cheerfully. He started picking something in the lock, and after a minute he swung the door open. "And here I am, saving the princess imprisoned in the tower," he joked, holding a screwdriver. "Yeah," Amanda smiled. "A good princess upset with the press in front of the toilet." "You're a fine lady." The man winked at her, and she admired his brown eyes. Dark-haired, handsome man. "Thank you," seriously the woman said as she left the stall. "And I'm sorry to barge into the men's room, but I'll tell you the whole epic with the search for the restroom." "Can we go out of here?" the man suggested, "and continue our acquaintance over a cup of tea? My treat." "I agree," Amanda said. "Where can I get something to eat here? I don't know the city." "Let's go to a pancake house right here at the station," the man suggested. "My name is John, by the way." "Amanda," the woman replied. "I agree. The pancake house is good. Let's go before the next leg of the road." They went to the far end of the building, where a sign with the image of appetizing pancakes hung. Once inside, they placed their order. Amanda chose cheese pancakes, and John chose chicken pancakes, plus 2 cups of black tea. We sat down at a table while we waited. "Where are you from?" the man started the conversation. "On business or visiting? Is this your first time here?" "No, not for the first time. I've already come once for an interview. I'm from the district center. We don't have much work there. I found a vacancy here. I got hired, and I'm moving." Brevity is the sister of talent, John smiled. In a few sentences, they informed me of the events of the past few weeks. "And what do you do?" the woman asked. "Where did you get a screwdriver all of a sudden?" "I work in a construction company. Constantly on the road, inspects objects. I accidentally picked up a screwdriver at the construction site after checking the fasteners. I found it on the train, called my colleagues and told them that I would bring it back the next time I visited them." "It was a lucky coincidence for me," Amanda said. "I don't know how long I would have had to sit there if it hadn't been for you." "Oh, our order is ready." John got up and went and got it. "Voila." He put the tray on the table. "I'll pay for it. I insist," the woman said. "You have a lot of money you need for rent. You'll need it now. Keep it, and I won't have to rent a hostel. That's why I got this job. It pays well and I have a place to live. After all, a hostel is cheaper than an apartment." "I see," the man replied. "But still, I'm not used to paying for women. So I insist on treating you." "All right," Amanda accepted. "Where do you live?" "I'm in the suburbs. I own my own house, built it a few years ago for my family." The woman blushed a little because she was starting to like this man. "Are you married?" "Not anymore?" "No," he answered with restraint. "My wife died, a transient cancer. My daughter is left behind. It's just the 2 of us." "I'm sorry." "My condolences," Amanda said sympathetically. "How old is your daughter?" She'll be 9 soon. She's my pride and joy. She's a good student. She plays sports." "What kind of sports?" "I just got a job. State Athletics Training Center. She does skiing, plans to participate in races, but so far she's only enrolled in a sports school. Enrollment starts at age 9, but the coach was cooperative. Her daughter is a little younger, but they say she has abilities." "Are you an athlete? What kind of sport do you do?" I'm not. I take care of the athlete's health. I'm a nurse. Oh, how interesting. It's a bit of a catch-22, if you'll pardon the expression. I've been getting some injections lately. Don't think I'm sick. I just banged my elbow on a door jamb. Now it's a nerve problem. I can't feel my fingers. There's this nasty feeling that the whole nerve from elbow to hand is like a taut rope. Yeah, it's a minor injury, but it's a nasty one, Amanda agreed. Well, I do not want to go to the clinic for injections only to lose time in lines. So I was thinking of hiring a visiting nurse when I get back from my business trip. Maybe you'd be willing to help me out. Oh, I'd love a part-time job. But how would you get to the suburbs? There's a shuttle bus. If it's convenient for you, I'd rather invite you to our company's office. It's downtown. I'm just working all the time. My daughter is looked after by a governess and my mother-in-law. And me, staying late and at night, it would hardly be convenient for you to come to our house. It's a deal, Amanda said. I'll just check my schedule at the new place and contact you to discuss a convenient time. And for that we need to exchange phone numbers, the man smiled. Write mine down. That's how they began to communicate. And for 10 days, which lasted a course of prescribed injections, they became close. This was undoubtedly due to the daily contemplation of my naked heel, John joked. Yes, I appreciated your confidence, Amanda agreed. They began seeing each other on John's rare days off. His daughter Catherine was very unhappy with Amanda's appearance. Daddy, let's go out. I miss you so much. Why are you leaving home for that woman? The girl asked unhappily. Don't you love me anymore? Of course I do. I just want to take a little break from work and family matters and spend time with someone I like, the man said as affectionately as possible. You'll like her, you'll see. However, the girl took her father's new friend in stride. John and Amanda did not give up hope that the girl will eventually change her mind. But that didn't happen. After the first meeting and a trip to the park, they tried to go to the movies together, but Catherine again only frowned, showing that she was not interested in everything that was happening. You know what I suggest? John suddenly suggested to Amanda the next day. I think if we all live under the same roof, Catherine will realize that we're serious, and she'll soften up on you. I don't think it's time yet, Amanda shrugged. Maybe we should wait. Why wait until we're old? I want to live a full life with my family now, not put everything off for the future, the man insisted. The woman agreed, even though it seemed like a bad idea to her still only a few months after meeting him. She gave up her dorm room and moved in with John. Catherine took this fact with unexpected calm. A week later, Amanda realized why. Honey, my childhood friend Charlie is coming to visit us on Sunday, John said on Friday. He lives in another city and wants to show his fiancée his native New York. But he wants to meet my fiancée too. He hugged the woman and kissed her. And I'm already in bride status, Amanda smiled as she returned the kiss and also hugged the man. Of course, I'm an honest man and I always marry the ones I love, John jokingly assured her. If that can be considered a proposal, then I'm in, Amanda said. That's just in case, the man said affectionately. We'll talk about it later. On Sunday, Amanda woke up early. She set the alarm clock for 8 because it was going to be an active day. She had to feed the guests breakfast after the road, then walk around the city, show the sights to Charlie's fiancée, and in the evening have dinner at a restaurant. Amanda really wanted to make a good impression on the people close to John. Now we'll have a quick coffee, she thought as she looked at the sleeping John. Then I'll do breakfast, and closer to their arrival I'll do my makeup and hair. With those thoughts, she stood up and reached for her glasses, which were on the nightstand. The woman had poor eyesight, so she wore contact lenses for work and other occasions when she left the house. At home, she wore glasses. Now Amanda was running her hand over the surface of the nightstand, trying to find the glasses, but it was as if they weren't there. That's odd, the woman thought. Maybe John moved them. But why? And I don't want to wake him up. She got up, bent over to the nightstand, trying to see what was on it. Then squatted down and ran her hands across the floor, deciding that the glasses might have fallen there. Amanda then looked for them everywhere: on the nightstand at John's side, on the dressing table where her makeup was, and on the windowsill. but the glasses were nowhere to be found. God, I threw away my contact lenses yesterday, remembered the woman. How am I going to get ready for the guests? John was supposed to buy the lenses. Later in the morning, he was going to meet the guests at the train station and could stop at the optician's on the way. For now, without lenses or glasses, Amanda was effectively paralyzed. She couldn't cook, she couldn't clean the house. The feeling of helplessness made her cry. What happened? John woke up. Upon hearing what had happened, he said he would go get the lenses right away. John, at 8 a.m. on a Sunday morning, where's the optician open? Amanda sighed. I'll find out which store opens first, the man said soothingly. In the meantime, you try to relax. Amanda went back to bed since she couldn't do anything anyway. John picked up his phone, went online, looked for the nearest optician open from 9 o'clock, and started to get ready to go. Let's listen to some music, he said, handing Amanda a small player. It helps me on business trips when I get tired of looking at my phone on the train. Amanda put on the headphones, turned on the player, and closed her eyes. John was right, the tunes distracted her, and it didn't seem so bad that she wouldn't have time to do her hair as she'd planned. The most important thing for her was to feed her guests. I'll have to do without baking. I won't have time, she realized, and began to rethink the menu. Half an hour later, John returned. Amanda put on her lenses and finally went to wash her face and then to the kitchen. To her surprise, there on the windowsill were her glasses. John, how did they get here? She asked in amazement to the man who had entered next. Did you leave them here? He laughed. You've ruined your own mood this morning. I'm sure I didn't put them here. Why would you? How would I have gotten to the bedroom without them? Well, maybe you're tired. Took them off, left them on. The man shrugged. But Amanda was sure she couldn't have done such a thing. She had a bad suspicion in her head that she decided not to voice for the time being. In a couple of hours, the guests were to arrive, and she didn't want to meet them with a scandal and without food, so she started cooking. The rest of the day went according to plan. John's friend and his fiancée arrived. Everyone liked each other and had a good time. Even Catherine, who had been taken for a walk around the city, seemed to be in a good mood. Maybe I'm imagining things for myself, thought Amanda, observing the girl's behavior. But after a few more days, she became convinced of what she already suspected. The child began to constantly do small nasty things to her, then hide something, then in the yogurt spilled cereal, then throws shoes. Amanda just kept quietly tidying up. After one of the first incidents, she tried to inform John about his daughter's antics, but the response was not what she had hoped for. John, do you really believe I would do such a thing? For some reason, Amanda led the man into the living room where her underwear was strewn across the couch and chairs. Why would Catherine do such a thing? He said indignantly. Because she doesn't like me. This isn't the first time she's done something like this. Remember the stories about the glasses? I don't know why you're snapping at her. It can all be explained by your forgetfulness. I forgot that I left my underwear all over the room, but you what? Let's drop the subject, the man said irritably. I love both you and my daughter, so try not to swear. Nice touch, washed his hands of it, Amanda thought resentfully. Okay, I'm not going to take revenge on the child, I'll be patient. It went on like that for about a year, until the family moved into a new big house. John insisted. I want to see a new family nest in a new place, he told Amanda. I was living with a different family in the old house after all. It's time for us to start our own. You and I have been putting off getting married. But I think we should get married, and the house is officially in your name. You're a little emotional when you talk about such important steps, aren't you? The woman was a little surprised. Perhaps I'm afraid to jinx my happiness, the man smiled. It hurts when you enjoy life, and it is like envy to you as a footstool. Like my first wife died, Catherine had just grown up. I got the job I have now, and everything was going so well. And then it all fell apart. We'll be fine, Amanda said softly. They chose a house together. Catherine was excited about the move. I'll have a big room, the girl rejoiced. Yes, your current one in our old house will seem like a cubbyhole compared to it, John replied. Let's go with your taste. Amanda decided to improve the opportune moment, as long as the girl was in a good mood. "Let's you be the one to choose our common house. Look where you like best, what room, what yard, and so on." "Okay," Catherine agreed cheerfully. John silently took Amanda's hand and discreetly stroked her fingers in appreciation. They found the house quickly enough. The two-story building was located in a quiet neighborhood. There was a small courtyard in front of the front door, and a large area at the back of the building where they could plant flower beds or vegetables. Trees were already growing their fruit: apples, pears, ornamental and birch trees. The whole family literally fell in love with this place, and the deal to buy it was done. A couple weeks later, they moved in and immediately put their old place on the market. "We'll use the money to go on a honeymoon," John said that evening at the first dinner in the new house. "And we're going to furnish the place to our liking. And we'll buy you a car, finally." "Thank you. I'm very happy right now," Amanda replied. "And I'm grateful that you've changed my life." "You changed mine," the man looked at her tenderly. Catherine, who was watching the scene, wrinkled her nose but said nothing. 6 months later, the couple played a wedding. There were few guests: John's father, his mother was dead, Amanda's parents, and a few of their closest friends. An unexpected guest was the man's former mother-in-law. He kept good relations with Anna Vitalievna and even decided to invite her to his new marriage. "God grant you a long life together," she sincerely wished him, raising her glass. Amanda looked at her gratefully, happy that this woman who had lost her daughter had found the strength to accept the new woman who was taking care of her granddaughter. She didn't know then what her ex-mother-in-law's love for her child, the only family she had left, would mean. "I'm not wearing that." Catherine threw her summer dress in Amanda's direction. "They'll make fun of me at school." Years passed. Catherine turned 15 and adolescence was in full force. By this time she had won many competitions in cross-country skiing, received a sports category, and was enrolled in the School of Olympic Reserve. The school year was about to begin, and Amanda offered encouragement to update her closet. It was on the day Amanda was going to take her shopping that Catherine ruined her stepmother's morning coffee. "I'm an athlete, not a party girl," irritatedly said the girl now, running from one outlet to another. "But you're a girl. You have to look like one," Amanda answered her calmly. "You can't always wear tracksuits." "But I do play sports," Catherine countered. "But not all of you. You have to wear something to class, to lectures." "I'll see what other people wear, then I'll decide. But thank you for your concern." Catherine finished the conversation. Amanda sighed and followed the stubborn girl to the sportswear store. Buy new tracksuits. It was impossible to understand her stepdaughter. Sometimes she seemed to be good to her stepmother, and sometimes Amanda found that she continued to sneak around. It usually happened after some sort of spat. "I wonder what she'll come up with tomorrow," the woman thought curiously, waiting for the girl from the fitting room. "Will she put something in my coffee again? Will he delete my files in my laptop or throw out something worse?" But surprisingly, there were no consequences. Despite the disagreement at the store, the girl hadn't gotten back at her stepmother in any way. Amanda had really hoped that the simmering conflict would die down on its own when Catherine entered college and moved into the dormitory. But John insisted that his daughter stay at home. "I know what goes on in these dormitories," he said. "I don't want you wasting your time hanging out instead of studying." At that moment, Catherine and Amanda finally shared something in common: disappointed facial expressions. Both had hoped to see each other less often. "Oh well, I'll wait for her to get married," Amanda thought with bitter irony. The everyday life dragged on. Everything went on as usual. John often went on business trips. Amanda worked as a nurse. Catherine was at college until late in the evening. A phone call interrupted the routine, and in December, disaster struck. "We can't find your husband," Amanda got a call from the college that afternoon. "Your little girl has been seriously injured. She's in the emergency room." Amanda didn't remember taking off work and calling a cab. Despite everything, she loved this girl, even though she didn't reciprocate. She ran to the emergency room and learned that Catherine had a displaced tibia fracture and was being prepped for emergency surgery. "Do you need parental consent?" the woman asked the young doctor who admitted Catherine. "Her father is now in another city, and I did not adopt her. Can I give permission?" "It's okay," the doctor replied. "At 15, she can consent to surgery on her own." "Okay," Amanda said, confused. "So it's bad. What's the prognosis?" "I'm not an attending physician. I just examined her and referred her for surgery," the man replied. "Talk to a specialist later. All I can say is that this type of fracture is complex, and rehabilitation after it is very long. But she will not be disabled. She's an athlete." "Let's hope not," shrugged the doctor. "Understand, everything will be clear at the operation depends on how well the specialist will be able to assemble the bone. I really can neither scare nor reassure you." "It's fine now." "I'm sorry," Amanda said. "Wait until the surgery is over. The doctors will come out and tell you everything at once." The woman went to wait in the lobby of the clinic. She tried to call John, but he didn't pick up. Maybe he's in negotiations, Amanda thought, even though it had been hours already, and no one still couldn't reach him. How worried is he going to be, poor guy? I guess I can't understand these parental feelings. After all, it's not like I don't have kids. Her thoughts jumped to the unpleasant history of their attempts to have a child. Amanda and John had thought about it a couple of years ago, when their life together had settled down. They were in their early 30s, and the chances of having a baby were quite high. However, Amanda was not able to get pregnant. They had undergone numerous tests that showed the couple to be perfectly healthy. "There are such cases," explained the fertility doctor. "There may be something going on due to nervous tension, and the body doesn't want to get pregnant in a stressful situation of the stressors." Amanda could only remember her relationship with her stepdaughter. Otherwise, she and John had a calm, measured life without upheaval. And it appeared that, ironically, she was unable to have a child because of the presence of another child in her life. Her nervous thoughts were interrupted by a phone call. It was John. "Oh my God," he said, horrified to hear what had happened. "I'm on my way. I'll be there tomorrow. Take care of everything, please." The girl was operated on immediately. The doctor came out to Amanda and said he was satisfied with the result. Catherine was coming out of anesthesia, and the woman was told that she could visit her tomorrow. Amanda went home. "It's unaccustomedly quiet here," she thought as she entered the house. Amanda went to the bedroom, and from her worry she powerlessly sank down on the bed and fell asleep. It was as if everything went well from there. Catherine was discharged, being warned that she would have a cast for at least 2 months. The girl was very upset because she missed classes and was basically very limited in movement. She sat at home, read a lot, and watched movies. "You look so downcast," Amanda said, looking at her daughter. "What do you want?" "She's very worried about not being able to play her favorite sport," John replied. "It's hard for her at her age to put up with so much. It's all about getting it right," John sighed. "I'm sure she'll catch up with her classmates." But Catherine was not so lucky. When it came to the point to remove the cast and begin the long rehabilitation process, it turned out that the bones are not properly healed, and there were symptoms of osteoporosis. The bone had become less dense and less strong, the doctor explained to John and Amanda. This can lead to new fractures, even from minor stresses. "What should we do?" John asked. His voice trembled. "Treat it. First, we have another operation as soon as possible, and then take special drugs to stimulate bone formation. The endocrinologist prescribes them." "That's good. Who do you recommend?" clarified the worried father. "I would recommend treatment abroad. There are good clinics in Germany, but it will be expensive, you understand." "We'll find the money," John replied calmly. They drove home depressed in Amanda's car. The woman was driving. John and Catherine sat in the back. The girl pressed herself against her father and cried quietly, realizing that it will not soon be able to take up skiing and generally return to the usual way of life. "I'll have to leave the school," finally raised her voice Catherine. "Let's not be in a hurry," John said soothingly and held his daughter to himself. "Take a sabbatical for a year." Amanda was silent the whole way there and back. The woman sympathized with Catherine, but she had some very important news of her own that she didn't want to tell her family yet. What good fortune. What bad timing, Amanda thought in the bathroom this morning when she saw the 2 long-awaited stripes on the pregnancy test. No, the good news will have to wait after all. I have to deal with Catherine first. The woman decided and put the test back in the package, and then hid it in the pocket of her robe. And now, on her way home, she tried her best to hide her joy at finally becoming a mother. No matter how hard she tried to shift her focus to her stepdaughter's health, Amanda couldn't escape the thoughts of her future child. Boy or girl, she pondered. And how will they get along with Catherine? Won't she be jealous if she starts doing nasty things like she did to me? This is where Amanda started to get worried. And that's when she intercepted her stepdaughter's tense gaze in the rearview mirror. Amanda flinched. She was staring at her with unconcealed anger. The woman averted her eyes and gripped the steering wheel. She felt very scared. She had a premonition of something very bad. I found a suitable clinic for Catherine in Germany, John said a few days later. Now I will collect the money. The amount, of course, astronomical, more than 1,000,000 rubles. And this is only for the operation. And also rehabilitation. What's all this money for? Amanda was horrified. It includes not only surgery, but also tests, a consultation with an orthopedic traumatologist before the operation, and examination after the surgery. 3 days in the hospital, 6 days in a hotel. And transportation, pick up from the airport, take to the hospital, and then to the hotel. I see the woman sighed. At least afterward, when Catherine comes home, I'll be able to take care of her myself. I'm a nurse, so at least we'll save a little money. Why don't you want money from me? Catherine suddenly said rudely. There's plenty to spend it on. Amanda was taken aback. I just wanted to know what the money would be used for. So it's all inclusive, except for the food. That means there's money for that too. You're right, said John. I planned to borrow the whole amount from the director of my company and pay off part of her salary. John served the whole amount and made an appointment. The director agreed to give the money in a large advance, and John received it a few days later. I've never seen so much money, Amanda said as they spread the bills out on their bed to do an exact count. It should be enough for everything, both surgery and rehab. But I'll give you more if you need it, John said. Children are sacred. How do I tell him I'm pregnant? Amanda thought after he said that. Maybe I should wait until Catherine's surgery and then tell him the good news. They put the money in the nightstand in the bedroom and went to bed. In the morning, everyone went to work, leaving Catherine to pack. For the hospitalization, her grandmother Anne came over to help. All day Amanda was distracted. She barely worked her shift. Tired, she got in her car and drove home. The next day she felt worse, dizzy and nauseous. Could it be toxemia? Amanda thought. It's a little early. Maybe it's the age thing. I wouldn't drive today, in case she felt sick, so I'd call a cab. At work, she felt bad. She excused herself and went to see a gynecologist. Her eyes were blurry. Could Catherine have poisoned me with something? She had a terrible thought. No, she's not capable of serious harm. She can't do a little mischief, but she can't poison me. The doctor advised Amanda to drink plenty of water, to include fermented milk products and porridge in her diet, and prescribed magnesium and vitamin B6 supplements. Amanda drove home, wishing she could go to bed sooner. She felt weak and drowsy, but a nightmare awaited her at home. The money's gone. She was startled to see John at her doorstep. How? Catherine was home, and her grandmother Anne. Who could have gotten in? They say they left to buy Catherine a backpack for the road. The old one was all worn out. But who could have known we had that kind of money at home? Only ours. Your principal. Amanda was thinking out loud. I'm shocked, to be honest, John admitted. We have to leave tomorrow. Everything's been arranged, and we don't have the money. Amanda went up to the second floor, went into the bedroom and sat down on the bed at a loss. Her head was simply splitting. Her brain refused to recognize the reality of what was happening. She stared blankly at the nightstand where the money had been lying in the morning and didn't know how to comfort her husband. We found the money. She suddenly heard Anne's voice from downstairs. Amanda struggled to get up and walk downstairs. She was glad that the situation was resolved and wanted to know what had happened. She walked into the living room, and Anne said caustically, "Shame on you, thief." "What are you talking about?" Amanda asked, puzzled. How could you steal money from a sick child? Anne turned to her. It's a good thing I thought to look in your car. And we found the whole amount there, added Catherine, who was sitting next to her grandmother on the couch. John looked at his wife in silence with contempt. She did not know what to say, so absurd were these accusations. She hid them in the trunk under a bag with some tools, said Anne. I didn't expect that. You've lived together for so many years, and you? Why did you skip work today? Catherine added. We're thinking where to hide the money? Were you looking for a safety deposit box? Or did you want to give it to your lover, but you didn't have time to take it out? What is this nonsense? Amanda finally found her voice. And how do you know I wasn't at work? I called you to see if you had an extra backpack. I had a doctor's appointment. You could have called my cell phone. Why would you call my cell phone at work? Catherine said. I don't understand what you're thinking about money. You didn't plan any of this? That wasn't the plan. Anne interrupted her. Maybe you planted it on me, suddenly realizing, turned to Catherine. Amanda, nice setup. Very skillfully thought out this time. Slipping money into my car. It's not like putting pepper in my coffee. You're an asshole, not a human being. The woman suddenly burst into tears. All these years we've been living, and you're ruining my life. So John roared. Shut up, and he turned on his wife. How dare you yell at my child, and a sick one at that? And how dare she accuse your wife of incomprehensible things? Amanda parried. Do you have some kind of double standard? Fuck you, suddenly bellowed her husband. You can't touch my daughter, you infertile fool. I have you for her. Wanted to ruin her life. Disrupt the operation urgently. Are you out of your mind? I would never in my life have started, was Amanda, but no one was listening to her. Get out, yelled John. I don't want to see you. I'll file for divorce as soon as I get back from Germany. And I'll be damned if I leave you any property. 2 months later, Amanda sat in her dorm room and calculated how much money she had left before her paycheck. The amount was not encouraging. She had to keep buying vitamin supplements. Pregnancy was harder on her than expected. And I don't have any savings, Amanda pondered. And nothing to sell. John took everything from me. He signed the house over to himself in the divorce with his lefty lawyers in the car, and even the gifts he gave me. Over the years, all my inexpensive jewelry. Only her parents knew about her pregnancy. She didn't have time to tell John at first, and afterward she didn't want to. She was too hurt by the way her ex-husband had treated her. Maybe you should tell him, after all, Margaret's mother exhorted the woman. I don't want to. The daughter shook her head negatively. My child doesn't need a father who threw his mother out on the street after 6 years of living together without much of a trial. Take my grandmother on Dad's side of the family. She split up with her husband because of him. Too, he cheated on her. So she went to her house in a remote village and did not let him on the doorstep when he came to repent. And after that he lived as a hermit. So she took offense at the whole world. I remember that story, Mom. I only visited her a couple of times when I was a child, and after that she refused to accept everyone and got into herbs. She treated the locals, but for some reason she didn't want to know her family. Strange, isn't it? And her house is still intact. But no one goes there. When they buried her, they forgot the road. It's probably overgrown. But I'm not going to be a hermit, Amanda smiled. I have no grudges against the whole world, just one person. It was time for the first ultrasound. A few months ago, Amanda never imagined that she would have to go in for a checkup alone, without her loving husband, on such an important day. Her mom was back in town. She couldn't stay with her daughter. Amanda's father had had a stroke and the man needed to be cared for. So the baby is fine, the doctor who performed the ultrasound told Amanda. Do you want to know who it's going to be? Yes. Amanda opened her eyes in anticipation and smiled contentedly when she heard the answer. It had been a year. John had been working on his daughter's rehabilitation the whole time. The operation in Germany was successful, but the cast was not removed for a long time, and it took a long time to develop the leg after all this. However, despite all efforts, Mary limped, and her character from this did not improve at all. "Why did fate do this to me?" said the girl irritably to her father. "I wanted to devote my life to sports. And what in the end? What am I to do now? To live and recover in time is how long has it been? Do you believe I'll miraculously heal and start skiing again?" "Look, but you can be more than just an athlete or a coach. There are different training programs, including for people with disabilities." "What do you think I am? Handicapped?" Catherine exclaimed with tears of anger in her eyes. "No, that's not what I meant to say." John tried to calm his daughter. But she did not listen and went to her room. These conversations were happening more and more often, and they were devastating to the man. "I was always on her side," he thought bitterly. "So many years did not marry, took care of her feelings. Kicked the traitor Amanda out when I found out she was dirty. Now I live alone. Why doesn't she appreciate that?" The young man was totally dependent on his daughter's whims. He reluctantly went home from work, because there he was waiting for a frowning-faced Catherine and her eternal dissatisfaction with complaints. He began to spend even more time on business trips, and in one of them met a nice woman, Amber. She worked as a waitress at the restaurant where he and his partners went for dinner. "Where do you always go at night?" "After a month, my daughter suspected something was wrong." "I go out with my friends. Not all I have to babysit you." John cut him off. In fact, he did not want to tell his daughter about his personal life, remembering her attitude to Amanda. The man offered Amber to move to his town, rented her an apartment the income allowed, and visited her several times a week. Amber accepted the status of secret lover. "I don't care," she told her friend in a telephone conversation. "Like a cheese and butter I roll around. I don't have to work. I make eyes at him. I chase his legs, and he, sweetheart, is ready for anything." She laughed. "You're lucky," she sighed enviously. "I would have to find someone to provide me with everything." "Maybe we'll get married." Amber continued to brag. "I've been hinting at him, working him up, but he's afraid to introduce me to his daughter. According to his stories, she's a very spoiled, capricious girl." "But good luck to you," wished her friend. "At least call me to the wedding. I'm sure you'll get what you want." But the plans of calculating Amber was not destined to materialize. However, it was only her own fault she missed socializing. Sitting alone in her apartment 24 hours a day, she got herself a lover, 20-year-old Michael from the neighboring entrance, who was constantly looking at the poor woman, who went shopping at the grocery store in a provocative short dress and stilettos. One day she lured him with her finger into the entryway, and he obediently followed her. "You are my goddess," whispered the enchanted young man, lying in bed after his lovemaking. His admiration pleased her ego but let her guard down. One day she was kissing a young lover in the street near her driveway and didn't notice John pulling up in his car. He got out of the car and stood silently watching Amber and Michael embrace. "Young man," he finally said snidely, "let me help you pack up your beauty's things and take them outside. She's moving in with you now, I suppose." Amber and Michael looked away from each other, stunned. The woman realized it was pointless to make excuses in such a situation and, sighing, went to her entryway to say goodbye to her apartment and to pack up her belongings. What a fool, she thought frustratedly. Now to return home with nothing to eat. "Emberochka, really move in with me," Michael said, catching up with her on the stairs. "Are you stupid?" she answered rudely, opening the apartment. "Milk on your lips has not dried up, and you're already climbing up skirts? Get out," and slammed the door in his face. The confused guy with the eyes of a hurt kitten remained standing in the stairwell, but Amber didn't care about him anymore. "God, who have I messed with?" John pondered as he walked home. It's from loneliness, apparently not recognizing a woman of easy virtue, he began to feel very sorry for himself. It felt like he was paying the price. But by an effort of will, the man restrained himself. At home, he was waiting for the second part of the play, which could be called a comedy of situations. But it was not a comedy, but a tragedy. Catherine met her father with hysterics. "I want to go to the sea," she declared, suddenly entering the living room, where the man sat down to rest from emotion. "Catherine is tired of sitting at home and going to doctors. Daughter, it is necessary to heal. Something cranky. We'll go on vacation in a couple of months, I promise." Why not now? I'm tired. I want to swim. It's good for my leg. Let's go this week, she demanded of her father. Stop it, John shouted at her, his nerves finally giving out. First the mistress surprised him, then the daughter made demands. Why are you yelling at me? Why are you acting like a little kid? You're an adult, but you're only doing things. You're sassing me. What do you want? You don't like me. Maybe your new baby will be better. Is that what you're counting on? What baby, for God's sake? John waved her away. I'm not having any kids. If you found out about Amber somehow, don't worry, I broke up with her. Amber? Who the hell is Amber? I meant your Amanda. Did she have an abortion or something? I don't get it, John frowned. Why are you bringing her up? And what does that have to do with the abortion? But she should have been in labor by now. Didn't you even ask if you had a son or a daughter? She was pregnant when she left here. It finally came to John. I didn't know about it. How did you know? I found a 2-stripe pregnancy test in her robe. She obviously didn't put someone else's in there. Oh my God. So you really did go through her stuff all the time, just like she said. And I was a fool not to believe it. Yes, Catherine smirked. I got rid of her beautifully, didn't I? Our plan was a success. John silently looked at the monster, in which he could not recognize his daughter, and with horror waited for the continuation, although he was beginning to guess what she means. Grandma Ann helped me, the girl said. As soon as I found this test, I realized that you would soon abandon me. New wife, new offspring. Her tone became dismissive when it came to the baby. So I got my grandmother to help me plant money for my stepmother. I could barely walk on my own. How could you? John exhaled in shock. Grandmother broke quickly, boasted Catherine. She has no one but me. She was already worried about me. And then I frightened her that you'll start a new family. You'd dump me, an invalid, on her. So it's about money. It turns out, looked at Catherine father. In general, yes, she shamelessly confirmed. The man got up, left the living room and went to the second floor, not seeing the road. He came to his senses when he hit his toes on the banister, as if in a fog. Climbing the stairs, he went into his office, where there was a small bar, took out a bottle of cognac, a glass, sat down at his desk, and began to get methodically drunk. After a couple hours staggering, he went downstairs and hailed a cab. Get me Amanda, who recently moved in, he demanded of the janitor at the hostel, where his wife had lived before their marriage. Amanda who? Go sleep it off, she scolded. I'll call the police. Nurse Amanda. She was supposed to move in here a year ago. I know exactly who you're talking about. She moved out before she gave birth. Bought herself a house. A house? John was surprised. Where did she get the money? You mean her ex-husband? The one who kicked her pregnant and penniless out of the house. She earned the money for the house. It was a very interesting story when she was 6 months pregnant. Amanda had lost her spirit. She went to work, returned to her dormitory in utter despondency. Didn't know where she was going to get the money to support her child. Her parents could not help. The father needed expensive medicines and physiotherapy. The woman didn't even think about returning to her hometown and creating additional expenses for her mother, for herself, and the child. Can't do this anymore, she thought, as Emily lay in her one room on an uncomfortably narrow bunk that made her back ache. I need a distraction, somewhere to get out so I don't spend a lot of money. And then the conversation with her mother about her reclusive grandmother popped into her head. Amanda was revitalized. It would be possible to go to that abandoned cottage, to walk away from the noisy city, to breathe the forest air. And in a few minutes she was on her way. The cabin was only 30 kilometers from the city. You could get to the nearest village by electric train, and then you had to walk a couple of kilometers through the forest. How overgrown is everything here, marveled the woman when she reached the place. And here my grandmother had medicinal herbs and a vegetable garden. She stepped inside the cabin. The shriveled door was unlocked. Inside was old furniture covered in dust. Amanda found a stool, laid a cellophane bag she had with her on it, and sat down to rest from the road. She was in a strange mood. How nice to go back to childhood for a little while, she thought. And how sad that I'm as lonely as my grandmother was. And then the woman's gaze fell on a puffy Soviet-era stationery book lying on a table nearby. She reached out, picked it up, and dust kicked up into the air. The recipes were written in the book in chemical pencil. I didn't know Grandma was into self-medication, Amanda marveled. She opened the book, and there were recipes for healing ointments and other remedies her grandmother had made. There were a good 100 of them, if not more. Leafing through the book, Amanda noticed a section called Back Pain. Interesting to try this, she thought. My back is hurting more and more every month. Late in the pregnancy, it's scary to think what will happen. I'll take this tome with me. At home, she prepared the ointment, having bought at the pharmacy those herbs that were in the recipe, and Vaseline as a base, tried to apply it to herself. And oh miracle! After 2 days, the pain in her back went away. The interested woman decided to try other recipes. Okay, let's try a hair mask. Amanda thought she was stressed because of her pregnancy and it caused a dull complexion. She decided to try the face mask because her skin looked terrible. The effect surprised not only her but also her co-workers. After a month, her skin was soft and her hair was smooth and shiny. Women at work flooded her with questions about what miracle remedy she was using. Amanda made them each a jar of her concoctions but didn't reveal the recipe. Word spread quickly, and soon she had a line of people lined up to receive the healing substances. We need to get someone to help, Amanda decided, and offered the job to the woman who lived closest to her. The same janitor who was now telling the story to John. I mostly just sit here, the older woman told the man. There's nothing to do at night, so I used to work part-time for your wife. And then she started selling goods through social media. It went well, and she moved into a small shop, opened it up and hired full-time help. John froze as he learned of his wife's fate. He had thought her a conniving liar until now, but it turned out that she was a capable businesswoman who started her own business without anyone's help. The child she gave birth, he inquired quietly. Yes, I can give you the address. You can talk to her yourself, the woman relented. Even though you have rattled her nerves. She was very fond of you at the time. John took the slip of paper with the address and thanked the woman profusely. Though he wanted to run to Amanda, he held back and went home, deciding he needed to get some sleep, sober up, and get himself back to normal. The next morning he showered, shaved, drank a few cups of coffee, and drove his car to his ex-wife's house. The closer he got to her house, the more nervous he became. What will she say to me? How will she take it? He pondered. If I were her, I'd probably spit in her face. He drove up to the right house, hidden by a tall green fence, got out of the car and knocked on the gate. After a while it swung open. Amanda looked up at him with the baby in her arms. John stood silent, unable to find the right words. Come in, the woman said, moving aside and letting him pass. I just found out about everything. About the pregnancy, John pronounced, waiting for her to close the wicket. She looked at him carefully and nodded toward the open door. Come inside. I'll give you tea. I had no desire to inform you after everything that's happened, Amanda said calmly as she walked into the kitchen. Sit down, I'll put the kettle on now. And how is Catherine? Has she recovered? Not so good. 1 minute she's better, the next she's worse. Moody. Behavior is atrocious because of it. I'm not surprised, Amanda smiled, rocking the baby who flinched at the sound of the kettle boiling. She wasn't an angel in the good times either. But whatever she thought, I treated her well and worried about her health. And she did such an ungrateful thing. She confessed everything John said it was her and Anne who set you up. What was the point of that? Why so jealous of me and the baby? Amanda sighed. And that's him. You said baby, so is it a boy? A boy, the woman blurted out in a smile as she looked at her son. We're 4 months old soon. What did you name him? John held out his hands and Amanda gently handed the baby to him. Stepan Jonovich. Sound good. Tears came to the man's eyes. Sweetheart, can you forgive me? I was not myself because of my daughter's illness. I snapped at you. I believed everything. You know, with the baby coming, I've begun to understand you better, Amanda replied. I don't know how I would have coped if Stepashka had gotten sick. How would I have behaved? So you can forgive me, John repeated. The most important question for him right now. Amanda answered it. We'll see. 6 months later, they celebrated a birthday. The baby was a year old. There were few guests, only the closest ones. Amanda's parents came. Her father got better and was able to endure the road. Also present were John's father and Catherine and her grandmother. I can't help but admire your kindness, John whispered to Amanda, taking a moment when they were alone in the kitchen preparing to bring out the desserts for the holiday table. You've forgiven Catherine and her grandmother. I think they've realized what they've done and are truly remorseful. What's the big deal? Holding a grudge for the rest of your life. Especially now. After all, it was lucky to have such a sister as Catherine became. John smiled. Yes, she really cares for him. Who would have thought it? She's forgotten about sports. She wants to be a teacher. God grant us all wishes, said Amanda. I already have all my wishes, the man replied. I have a real strong family. All my loved ones are with me every day. They hugged each other and looked into the living room, where at the same table were gathered people who had made mistakes and were eager to correct them, who were angry with despair but found the strength to overcome themselves and rejoice in the changes, who fought with illnesses but inspired others with their kindness, and of course, who knew how to forgive their loved ones. After all, family is the most important, the most valuable thing in our lives.
Please, cried the girl. She didn't have enough strength to drag this woman into the entrance, but no one could help. The streets were deserted. Selena didn't understand why she was doing this. It was just the first thing that came to mind she put into action. She made one last push, and already the woman was outside the threshold of the entrance. You stink. The girl plucked her nose and wrinkled her nose. She got up and went home. How long am I going to wait for you? Jack shouted to his buddies. Where are you always in a hurry? The guys were just putting on their leather jackets and blazers. I don't like to be late. He stood by the car and stared at the wheels. Nobody's late for anything. Billy came out to him. They had a jammed arrow today. They needed to keep their faces on the ground. How many? Asked Jack about the number of people his friends had pulled up. 40 men, one of them shouted. That's enough, he spat and got into the car. It wasn't the first time they'd been together, so they knew what was going to happen. They drove up to a large warehouse. No one was there yet. They started to look around. Not a couple minutes later, cars came from both sides, shooting. Jack fell to the ground. He grabbed his shoulder. He just couldn't feel it. How? Hey, fell down next to him to take cover behind a car, buddy. I'll live. He pulled a gun from behind his belt. The fight was not for life. Many of them just did not come out of it alive. Get to the cars, the man in charge shouted. But Jack, Sam looked in the direction of the enemy. I said to the cars, then we'll deal with these creeps. He turned and looked at the asphalt, where several lifeless bodies lay. Everyone in the car was silent. No one wanted to talk about what had happened. One thing was clear, there was no need to ever rush into anything. Those guys were saved by the effect of surprise. They saw where and how Jack's men were standing. To the restaurant, the young man said sharply to the driver. They turned, stopped in front of a beautiful building. Jack got out of the car. His cronies followed him. Quiet music was playing in the room. No one was there. Waiter, Jack called irritably, because there was no one in the room at all. Now, a woman's voice was heard. And now she came out from around the corner. The young man fixed his eyes on her. A tall girl with a chiseled figure. Short black hair, snow-white skin, red lips, and a short skirt made her irresistible. Mine, Jack turned to his companions. What do you want? The girl approached and began to smile. You. The young man grabbed her by the waist and pulled her closer to him. What are you doing? I'll call the guards. She was afraid. Don't worry, I won't hurt you. He sat her down next to him. I can't sit here, she looked back. With me, everything is allowed. He looked at her and admired her. They ordered. When everything was on the table, Jack poured in shots to memorialize those who didn't come back with them tonight. Beauty, do you have a name? The waitress sat with them as they did so. Inga, she said, looked at him and smiled. What a beautiful name, and I'm Jack. I feel like you and I were made for each other. He nuzzled his nose into her neck. I think you'd have to know a person a little bit to say that, she coquetted. I don't need anything. I can see everything. He pressed himself against her again. Inge liked that kind of treatment. She had wanted someone to like her for a long time. Today was her first shift at the restaurant, and such luck. They sat at the table until the evening, and then Jack stood up and held out his hand to Inge. Are you with me? He asked. If he says that, he's not asking about tonight. He's asking about forever, whispered someone behind Inge. Yes, she gave him her hand and got up from her seat. He nodded his head. That meant no one was getting in the car with him. The two of them went there alone. The girl looked out the window. They drove past various stores and other storefronts. It seemed to her that this man would do anything for her. She would be happy in this life. Jack was generous. He spared nothing for his girl, buying clothes, flowers, gold, anything she wanted. Inga didn't know what he did, but it didn't matter to her. She simply idolized her young man. Does it hurt? She approached him when he entered the apartment. Go away, he could have snapped at her, but Inga didn't notice it. Let it pass her ears. Jack, let me blow on it, she said at him affectionately. Inga, there's nothing there. He wrinkled his nose as he moved his hand. Why are you doing all this? What if they kill you? That was what the girl feared more than anything. Spit, he glared at her until she did. I'll go, she went to the kitchen. Bring something to drink, he asked in a loud voice. Right now, Inga was happy to do anything for him. And let's get married. He took her in his arms. They had been together for almost 6 months. Sure, she kissed him on the nose. Then I'm telling the guys to make sure it's all good. He set her on the floor, slapped his palm on her butt, and stared after her. What are you doing? She turned around and made big eyes. To buy a wedding dress back then, you had to have quite a few connections or try really hard, but Jack had both. He made a couple of calls, and the next day Inga was trying on a white dress. So it's big for you sat next to her friend Oksana. She thought it would be just Are you stupid? It can be sewn, but no one else has it. Only me, she shouted at her friend. And don't yell at me, the girl got up, came to Inga and started to pull the fabric. Yes, this will be just right. They looked in the mirror. Jack was getting ready too. He bought a suit. He really didn't want to wear a tie. I feel like I'm going to put all this on, and then you'll put me in a coffin, he said. What are you talking about? Said his witness and best friend, Billy. All right, help me. The groom stood in front of him to tie his tie. What's there to do? The guy was twirling 2 ribbons in his hands. Oh, all right. Jack pulled it all off. Who made up that I have to wear a tie? That's right, supported his friend. They were ready. The cars were decorated too. Now all that was left was to pick up the bride and drive to the registry office. The groom could not embarrass himself in front of his friends and the rest of the gang, so the best restaurant in town was ordered. The wedding party sang and sang until the morning, and the next day the guests who urgently wanted okroshka and brine. Well, wife, now I need an hair, kissed her in the evening young man. There will be for you an hair and heiress. Inga laughed rinningly. Well, I'm on business. He went out and slammed the door. Not even 3 months later, as the girl realized that she was expecting a child, and she informed her husband about it. See, you can have it any time you want. He was drunk. Were you with the girls? She pulled a hair off his jacket. Look, don't start, huh? He turned to her. What do you mean, no start? She moved closer to him. If you want to have everything, and you were nothing for it, do not start, advised the husband to his wife. It was the first time Inga had seen him like this. She backed away, thinking it was better for her to stay away. You my wife, I will always come back here. And women are women. He went to his room. Such a turn, Inga did not consider such a turn in her fate. She didn't know what her husband was doing, but she knew that he had a lot of money, an apartment, and more than several cars. How are you? Jack asked her at breakfast. It could have been better. She didn't look up at him. Oh, are we offended? He pulled his chair closer to her. Don't be. She took his hand off her knee. Okay, he stood up and walked away again. The girl looked out the window at him walking to his car. The pregnancy and delivery had been easy. Jack, as always, had put his wife in the best hospital there was at the time. "Well, hello, son." Jack greeted his wife and child from the maternity hospital. Inga saw that a lot of people had arrived. They were all family friends. "Thank you," she kissed her spouse as he handed her a bouquet of flowers. They arrived home, where in one of the rooms stood an assembled crib, a table, and a small dresser. The mother immediately put the baby down and began to make everything to make them comfortable here. "What are you doing?" Jack entered the room. "Like a place for me and my son." She stopped and looked at him. "There is no me and my son. There is us and my son. This is his room and he will be here alone." The man put the point. Inga was upset about this, but she realized that it was better not to argue with her husband. She spent her days in her son's room, and at night she went to her husband's room. "Jack, I think I'm expecting a baby again," she whispered to him one evening. Arnold wasn't even 2 years old at the time. "I'm just glad of that." He kissed her neck. Times had come to a point where it was very hard for ordinary people to live, and the Brawls got kind of pissed off. They started opening different firms, buying up everything, and the guns got tougher. "Don't leave the house today," Jack warned his wife. "Where are you going?" She grabbed his arm. "And I have to." He opened the door and left. Inga was very worried about her spouse. Over the past 2 months, they had already buried 4 friends. It was time to give birth. It was not scary, but exciting. Everything went exactly the same as the first time. Now the couple had a daughter, Julia. Billy came to meet Inga from the hospital. "Why not Jack?" The girl's eyes were very big. She was afraid to hear the worst thing in her life. "Because he's being shepherded," looked Billy in the rearview mirror. "I see." Inga leaned back in her seat and exhaled. They arrived home. Her husband was there. He greeted his wife and daughter, kissed her, and gave her flowers. "I need you." Jack approached Inga a couple months after Julia showed up. Yes, she was always ready. "Let's go. I asked a woman she'll watch the kids." He pulled her. "Where to?" The woman didn't understand. "Soon you'll understand everything." They left the apartment, went downstairs, got into the car. "We are now going to go sign the documents. Do not ask unnecessary questions," he warned her. "I understand." She never asked anything unnecessary. When all matters were settled, Jack locked himself in his office and did not come out for a long time. Inga went to the phone, made sure no one was listening, and dialed Billy's number. "Hello," she whispered. "What? Does Jack know you're calling?" He immediately asked a question. "No. Tell him what's coming up." She realized long ago. Tomorrow there will be a big shoot. Probably no one will come back. After these words, he immediately hung up. Inga cried. How she was alone with 2 small children in such a cruel world. It was unbearable to sit and just watch your husband prepare to die. "Talk to me," she asked him. "Not now." He turned away to avoid looking her in the eye. "When tomorrow?" She stared at him. "What do you know?" He guessed. "Practically nothing. It's very serious," she sniffed. "That's all. You don't need to know more." He still didn't turn to her. And he left. No kiss, no hug. Inge was offended. At home, the man did not return. The wife did not know what to do. She did not sleep, went from room to room. In the morning, when she lay down for a while, the doorbell rang. Inga jumped out of her seat like a stunned person and ran to open the door. A stranger stood outside the door. "Inga?" He looked at her. "Yes, and who are you?" Her legs became cotton. She realized that she was about to faint. "Alexander." He made a gesture to show that he wanted to enter the apartment. "Yes, of course." She let him pass her by. "Yesterday, you probably know, there was a massacre at the abandoned factory. Only he and Billy survived from Jack's crew. But Sirioba's injuries are very serious. He's in the hospital, and Jack was taken." The young man lowered his head. "How taken?" Inga shrieked and started to get nervous. "I don't know the details. I was only told to tell you about it." He left the apartment, went down the stairs and left, and the woman remained standing in the hallway. She went into the room to the children. Arnold was 6 and Julia was 3. She sat down on the couch that stood there, tears streaming from her eyes. Why hadn't he bothered to protect herself? Why had he let this happen? "Mommy, what's wrong?" Her daughter sat up next to her. "Everything is fine. Sleep." She looked at Arnold. He frowned. and did not want to talk to anyone about anything. Inga waited for the trial and what would be assigned to her husband. The sentence was cruel, but the lawyers tried. They managed to reduce the sentence by 6 years. Jack had only 9 years left to serve. "Don't cry," one of the wives of those who died pressed Inga to her breast. 9 years, she told herself. "Inga, pull yourself together," the woman slapped her. "What?" She grabbed her face. "Nothing, my husband died. I have children at home and everything else, and you are killing yourself," she shouted at the whole corridor. "I'm sorry," she didn't know what else to say. She returned home. Nothing was interesting. The children came, she fed them, did laundry, cleaned up, did everything else. She was in no mood. "Hello," she came to the phone in the evening. It had been 3 years since Jack had had his trial. "You didn't wake her up?" Billy called her. "No, just put the kids to bed." She lied, of course she'd been asleep for a while. "Can I come over to your place? Why are you avoiding it?" asked the guy. "Okay." The girl finally gave in. To be honest, she liked this guy since the first time they met, but she'd never told anyone about it. If Jack chose her, she'd stay with him. She'd never been alone with Billy because she was afraid of herself. But now, he'd asked to come over. "Hi," he stood on the doorstep with flowers. "Why?" She looked at the bouquet. "Why, you're a woman, and you like flowers." He was talking nonsense. "Come in." She took the bouquet and put it in a vase. "How are you here?" The young man came into the room. As you can see, she waved her hands. Until now, Inga had saved on everything, lived on the money that was still from Jack, and his friends helped whoever they could. Yes, not much. He listened to Inga's story. "What did you want?" She wanted him to leave. "Just to meet, to talk, to see you." He came closer to her. "Billy, you're his best friend." She looked into his eyes. "And what should best friends do? The right thing to do, the right thing to support at any moment." He finished and pressed his lips to hers. The woman's body so missed the man's caresses, she sagged toward him. Billy picked her up in his arms and carried her to the couch. "Don't," she whispered, but she couldn't tear herself away from his lips. "You're so beautiful." He undid the buttons of her blouse. They kissed. Billy was so tender, and at some point Inga felt someone watching them. She turned her head toward the door. Arnold was standing there. "I hate you," he said, grabbed something off the table and threw it at the couple. "Son." She jumped up, but he'd already gone to his room. "Don't mind him. He's just a kid. He'll forget." Billy pulled her back. "What? Practically 10 years old, little, you name it." She didn't know what to do now. "Okay, if you want, I can say your daddy went and left your mommy and I'll help you with everything." He put on his jeans. "When is Jack coming out?" She stared unblinking at the man. "When it does, everyone will have forgotten everything by now," laughed Billy. Since he offered, Inga didn't refuse. The children and she would be provided for again. And she liked Billy. A week later, they moved in with Billy. "Where are you going?" the man asked her as she gathered in the hallway. "To Jack's." She looked puzzled. "To Jack's? Forget that name. You're my woman now," he said simply. Then he would realize everything at once. Inga was afraid. "Calm down. Everything will be all right. I'm near." He came to her and helped her take off her coat. Of course, Billy was very self-confident. Arnold grew up a mean boy. He hated his mother because she betrayed his father, and he felt even more anger toward her new suitor. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Billy asked him when they were all sitting at the table together. "Traitor, how could you? He trusted you with everything. You were his best friend," the boy said through gritted teeth. "You're too young to talk about such things." The man smiled back. "I'll grow up and kill you," the boy promised him. "All right," agreed Billy. And so they lived. Julia was a quiet girl. She never fully understood why her brother hated these people. She loved her mother, and she was neutral toward Billy. But their quiet life ended when Jack came back. He was no longer the kind uncle who loved his wife and children. His son had written to him long ago to tell him what had become of his wife. All these years he dreamed of looking his friend and his wife in the eye. "Well, weren't you waiting?" He was standing in the doorway when Billy opened it. "Jack, hi." He reached out his hands to him, but was immediately punched in the face. "What are you doing?" "I meant well." His friend looked at him. "Yeah, you did." He nodded and went inside the apartment. Inga was sitting in the room talking to her daughter. She saw Julia's eyes get big, turned around, flinched. "Jack, what are you doing here?" She knew this was going to be bad. "It's you, what are you doing here? Pack up quickly and let's go home," he yelled. "Where's Billy?" She was shaking. "Ha, show you him?" The man returned to the corridor. He took his former friend by the scruff of the neck and threw him into the room. Inga saw that between his legs were all bloody. "What have you done?" She was so frightened that she didn't even think about the children seeing all this. "The sooner you pull yourself together, the sooner I'll call an ambulance," he smirked. "That's it, we're ready. Call it in," she thought. She could come back for her things next time. "Whatever you say, darling." He went to the phone and dialed the right number. After that, together with the whole family, they went to the place where they used to live. "And how could you think of such a thing? To leave me, ha? And to whom? To Siryoga?" He could not calm down. "Jack, I'm sorry. I thought it would be better for the kids." She lowered her head. "Trust me, no one will be better off now." He laughed again. They arrived. They got out of the car. Inga could see people walking by. She wanted to shout for them to stop and help her, but there was no way to do it. "Daddy, how glad I am that you came." Arnold did not leave him. "Yes, son, but I'm not very glad." He turned his head toward his wife. She was standing by the mirror. "What are you looking at?" He shouted sharply. "What are you doing?" She turned around and didn't understand. He hit her on the back of the head with force. She banged her face against the mirror, shattering it. Those were her first scars. "Arnold, call an ambulance," she begged her son. You call it. He stood watching his mother bleed to death. Why are you so angry?" She was crying. She was hurt and offended by everything that was happening. Inga saw that her daughter was dialing a number. A few minutes later, their doorbell rang. The doctors were horrified at what had become of the woman's face, but she didn't say who had done it. "Slipped on the floor and fell," she told the medic. "Yes," she nodded. "How bad?" She looked up at the medic. "Badly," he nodded. "Scars." Tears came to her eyes again. "There will be." The medic didn't hide it. She returned home with a bandaged face. Julia came to her. She sat next to her mom and stroked her arm. "What, Mommy, are you paying for your mistakes?" Arnold stood in the doorway. "What did I ever do to you?" She didn't understand. It hurt to speak, so she turned away and didn't want to say or hear anything else. Jack was busy again with some business. His capital had already increased during the time he had been in the out-of-the-way places, and now they were increasing. He was buying apartments, renting them out, cars, reselling them, whatever he could get his hands on. "Why do you put up with all this?" "Get away from him," Julia said, when the years of school were coming to an end. "Do you think he'd let me do that?" The woman's body was a wreck. Her husband did nothing but beat her, beating her, tearing her skin, putting out cigarette butts on her legs, back, and neck. Inga cried, but it didn't help. She endured. Julia felt sorry for her mom, but there was nothing she could do either. The girl wanted so much to get out of this house quickly, not to see all these faces surrounding her again, except her mom, of course. "I wish you, daughter, never to experience such a thing." Her mother kissed Julia. "Don't come home unnecessarily." Julia hugged her mother. She didn't need anything from her father or anyone else. She had finished school. Now she was about to enroll. She wasn't going home. Arnold never left his father's side for a minute. When he felt his shoulder next to him, he was so arrogant and cocky. When the man wasn't around, he was silent all the time. "We should change the car." He hinted to his father that he needed a new car. "I'll take care of it myself." The man stopped him. In the evening, when the table was set, the two of them sat at it. Inga did not come out. "Why do you put up with her?" Arnold asked Jack. "Don't you know?" The man was very surprised, for he knew that his son stuck his nose in everywhere he could. "Believe me, no," thought he. "So for love," bit off a piece of meat the young man. "You saw her, what love, and what a beauty she was." The man savored these words. "So why?" The boy kept up. "Then, when the hunt for me began, I signed everything over to your mother, so that I had nothing to take from me. It's a good thing she didn't know what she was signing to, or they'd have ripped me off with Billy," he said, his jowls moving. "I can see why you're so fond of her." Arnold got up from the table. He'd been out a lot lately, traveling to different parties. He didn't arrive alone this morning. Dad, meet Diana. He introduced the girl. For an hour or all day? Tamiki asked. You what? This is my girlfriend, said the son, offended. Ah, well, if it's a girl, then come in. He pointed to the sofa, which stood in the living room. Diana got acquainted with the mother of her young man. Oh, she came out of the bathroom when Inga was walking down the hall. Don't be afraid, said the woman in a hoarse voice. What's wrong with you? Diana looked at her. Husband and son tried, she said openly. God, the girl even lost the power of speech. Think many times before becoming his wife, Inga warned her. Excuse me, she went to her room. Slava liked that he now had a girlfriend. He spent a lot of time with her, wanted her to be his wife, but also that it was very early to propose to her. Arnold, why don't we go for a walk today? Diana chirped cheerfully. Okay, we'll go for a walk, just a little later. He didn't want to go anywhere, just to lie on the bed with her. All right, suit yourself, then I'll go. She already wanted to leave the room, but Arnold didn't let her. He threw a slipper and the doors closed. You're not going anywhere, I told you later. He looked at her and got angry. Slavachka, what are you doing? Diana was scared. Nothing, Diana, he mocked her. She walked over and sat down on the bed next to the guy. He grabbed her arm and pulled her to him with a sharp pull. It hurts, she wrinkled her nose. Me too, he started kissing her. Diana did not push him away, on the contrary. She began to reciprocate. The girl realized that one wrong action and he would just throw her to the trash. Hello, can I sit here? The girl came to Inga's room. Did you hit her? She guessed. No, just a fight. The girl averted her eyes. Yes, I know how he quarrels, sighed the woman. They sat in the room for a few minutes in silence. What am I to do? Asked Diana at last. Nothing, run or endure for the rest of your life. She pointed with her hand to her face. After that, the woman and Inga began to communicate well. Arnold proposed to me, she showed me the ring. You'd be a fool to marry him, the mother said quite seriously. But I love your son, she said confusedly. Yes, I thought I did too. Inga smiled a little. Will you help me prepare for the gala? She hoped for the woman's support. Of course, the woman never refused anyone. But the next day Arnold announced that there would be no celebration. They would just get married and sit here as a family. Would we invite Inga? The bride was sure of it. Of course not. The son wrinkled his nose. Good. Again the girl swallowed everything. On the weekend, they went to the registry office. If Diana wore a beautiful dress and arranged her own hair, Arnold was in stretchy sweatpants and a t-shirt. Could you dress normally? She didn't understand. And so it will do. You love me not for money and not for clothes, he winked at her. What a fool you are. Why are you like your father? Your mother has suffered so much and you are there. Diana got angry. They signed. They were now husband and wife. They came home, as Arnold wanted. There was a huge table in the hall, bursting with hors d'oeuvres. Only Jack was there to greet them. Well, hello, children. He hugged the two at once. Let's eat already, sat down at the table the groom. And I have a present for you. The father left the room. He came back with a box, handed it to his son. It was the keys to a new car. Thank you, Dad. I've wanted it for so long. The young man rejoiced at the gift like a child. Diana looked at the two relatives and waited for something to be given to her. But it turned out that there were no more presents. It was a shame. In the evening, she went to Inga's room and took some cake to treat her. Thank you, my daughter. But in the morning, you'll realize what kind of husband you've chosen for yourself, the woman said. No, we'll be fine, the girl assured her. Yes, the woman stood and nodded. She knew her son better than anyone and what he was capable of. I can't even imagine that your own son could do this to you, Diana told the woman. Believe me, he may not have done much physically, but mentally he was killing me to the point where I just wanted to lie down and do nothing else. Inga turned away to the window. Perhaps she could cry now, if there were still tears left. As Diana said goodbye to her, she left the room. The girl had no idea that all the things she had said today were to be experienced by her. Where have you been? She entered the room and heard the voice of her drunken husband. Arnold, what are you doing? She came up to him like a pussycat. What? That's what he hit her in the face. She flew right back to the door. The girl was lying there, looking at the young man with frightened eyes. "What do you think you're doing?" She started to get up, but he wouldn't let her. "You went to see her, didn't you? Do you want to become like her?" "Only I turn away, immediately to my friend you will go away." Stood over her and spoke haughtily. "What friend? You don't even have any friends." Diana didn't understand anything. "No friends." Again she received a blow in the side. "Soon will appear. Do not worry. And now go, wash up, and go to bed. I'm tired." Diana stood under the hot shower. Tears flowed down her cheeks. She didn't know what to do now. Inga was right when she said he was like that. Why did she take this step? Why did she marry him? Why did she pretend to some riches? And life, what about it? She couldn't stay in that shower forever. She had to get out at some point anyway. And Diana was out of there. Arnold was already asleep on the bed. She breathed a sigh of relief and lay down next to him. In the morning, he got up as if nothing had happened, kissed his wife, and told her that they were going down for breakfast together now. She couldn't bear to look at him. Right after breakfast, she went to her mother-in-law's house again. "Oh, did my predictions come true?" She looked at the girl's lip. "Yes, you were right. He was drunk last night, and everything happened as you said." Diana is ashamed to admit it. Inga came up to her, pressed her against her, stroked her head. At that moment, the door opened. On the threshold stood the son. What are you teaching her here?" shouted at his mother Arnold. "It's time for you to calm down. I'm not teaching anyone anything, and I myself did nothing wrong. I only wanted you and Julia to be happy," she told him in a calm voice. He grabbed her by the hair and pushed her. Her mother fell down. She didn't want to get up because she knew that this blow would be followed by another one. Arnold grabbed his wife's hand and they left that room. Inga got up. She didn't know what to do, so she went to her husband's office. "Jack, can I come in?" she asked at the door. "What do you want?" He looked at her sideways. "I want to talk to you." She sat down in the chair across from him. "Talk. No one's stopping you," he told her in a rough voice. "Why do you keep me here? Let me go. You are doing well. Why do you need me here in this house?" The woman did not understand. "Why, and you still don't understand why I keep you here?" And he told her all about the documents and the money. "I'll rewrite it all back," she said. "No, darling, I don't want to lose everything I've worked so hard for," he laughed in her face. "Am I to suffer with you for the rest of my life? So I will do it all without your help." She abruptly turned around and went to the exit. Come on, you'll only make our lives easier," her husband said to her. She ran down the steps and cried. She would never wish such a fate as hers on anyone. In her room, she opened the closet, took out a sash, tied it to the radiator. And the worst part was that she didn't have the fortitude to do it to herself. She sat down helplessly by that radiator and cried in her voice. In the evening, when father and son were conferring in his study, Diana came to her again. "Why did you come here again? Didn't you get enough of it last time?" "I'm quiet. They are in a meeting in the office." She pressed her finger to her lips. At that moment, the girl's eyes slid to the floor. She saw the belt. "Go." Her mother-in-law pushed her towards the door. "You what?" She stared at Inga. "Nothing. Didn't have the guts," the woman admitted. Diana walked out of her room, eyes widened. She imagined what could happen now. Would she have to suffer the same way for the rest of her life? The girl cried for the first time in this house just for fun, out of thought. She went out into the garden, where it was very beautiful. Arnold joined her a few minutes later. "Where are you going?" he asked casually. "Nowhere, I just decided to walk here." She looked at the green bushes. "If you go anywhere without my knowledge, you'll be fine," he said knowingly. "Arnold, I don't want to be your wife anymore." She looked at him pleadingly. "Why not? You've been pleasing me, all to get me to propose. And now what's happened?" He made a perplexed face. "Let me go, please." She put her hands together. "As soon as I get bored of you, you'll go straight to all four sides." He turned around and went into the house. "Fool," Diana said to herself and followed her husband. After that, further married life consisted of one thing. He came home. Diane slept with him. She was no good for anything else, according to Arnold. When there was no one else in the house, he and Inga would gather in the kitchen. They might even drink wine and gossip. But that was very rare. Usually both of them were in their rooms. Julia was by this time well into her studies. She knew that she could only rely on herself, so she had to get a profession. "Did you get in?" asked her friend, whom they had met on the train on their way here. "I don't know." Julia stood with her back to the board where the results were hanging. "Girlfriend, I congratulate you, and I got in just to another college. It's across the street." She pointed her finger at the building. At this point, Julia was finally able to tune in and turned around. She had indeed gotten in. "Shall we celebrate?" Nika pressed her. "Okay, just not tonight. I have a headache," she complained. "Well, how boring you are," took offense girlfriend. "Tomorrow or at the weekend we'll go somewhere," Julia said. "Aren't you going home?" Nika asked. "No, I don't want to talk to my parents," the girl confessed. "I see, but I'm going. So it's not fate." They laughed together. Julia did not want to shirk her studies. She chose the profession herself. She entered it herself, and now she wanted to finish it herself. But sometimes fate gives surprises you don't expect. They had a celebration at the college, dedication to students. It was fun, a concert, and afterwards, a disco. Julia had so much fun that she forgot about the time. When she looked at her watch, it was past 11. She ran to the dorm. No, the stern janitor mothballed her from the window. "Well pleased," the girl begged her. "I won't let her in." The woman stepped away from the window and walked away. Julia looked around. It was dark and cold outside. She didn't know where to go. She wandered to the nearest 5-story building, at least in the entryway to keep warm. There she sat down on the steps and dozed off. "Who are you?" A guy came up. "Nobody," the girl snapped at him. "Well, nobody. What are you doing here?" He sat down next to her. You could hear that he smelled of alcohol. "Leave me alone. They didn't let me into the dorm, so I'm sitting here." She didn't want to talk. "Let's go." He took her hand. "Where to?" She didn't want to go, so she started to pull away. "Don't be afraid, silly." He looked at her and smiled. Julia followed him. She wasn't. At least she'll be warm. "Here, I live alone. You can stay here." He let her into his apartment. "Thank you," she said quietly. The guy went to the kitchen, put the kettle on, went out into the corridor and watched her take off her shoes and jacket. "Let's go. I'll make tea," he called her. They walked through, sat down at the table. The young man made tea, put it in front of Julia. "Carlo," he sat down opposite. "Julia." She took a small sip of tea and burned herself. "So here's to introductions." He raised his cup. "Aha." She sat back and looked into hers. Carlo bedded the girl on the couch. She didn't want to sleep, a little afraid. But as soon as her head touched the pillow, she just passed out. "Wake up, sleepyhead. You'll sleep through everything." The guy woke her up in the morning. "Yes." Julia jumped up. "Where is she? What's wrong with her?" "I had a lot of questions in my head." "Don't worry, you haven't been drinking," he laughed. "I have to go to school." She started packing the things she had taken off yesterday before going to bed. "Will you meet me today?" he asked as he walked her to the door. "I don't know." She looked up at him. At that moment, something clicked inside. Why hadn't she noticed yesterday that he was so handsome? "Well, I know where you live. I'll come get you." He opened the door for her. Julia came out. From that moment, the girl couldn't help thinking about Alexei. She waited for him, but he did not come. The next day, she also waited for him, but again, he was not there. "What's going on with you?" Sarah, her roommate, asked her. "I think I'm in love." She didn't want to tell anyone how she felt. "With whom?" She was surprised because Dashka was either at school or in the dormitory all day long. "Remember when I didn't sleep at home?" the neighbor looked. "Yes," she nodded. "So Julia told me everything." "You have to be so naive. It's good. At least nothing happened in the apartment." Shook her head neighbor. "You don't understand anything." The girl was offended. "Okay, but you understand a lot." She turned her back to the wall. A month passed and Carlo never showed up. Even though the houses were next to each other, Julia never saw him. "There came to you," went up to their room on duty. "Who?" surprised the girl. She knew that a friend from a neighboring college could come, but she said she would be busy. "Some guy," the girl smiled. Julia's heart beat faster in her chest. She put on her slippers and went out. "Hi." Carlo was standing there, flowers in his hands. "Hello." She walked up to him, looking around to make sure no one saw anything. It seemed to her that everyone knew that she had been waiting for him for so long, and he had come only now. "Why are you so pensive?" he asked her. "No, I'm fine." Julia smelled the flowers. "Will you come with me for a walk?" he asked her. "I don't know," she shrugged. "Come on, I'll tell you where I've been." He pulled her by the arm, just like that time in the entryway. "Okay, I need to change." She took her hand out of his and ran upstairs. "What, you're here?" the roommate asked. "And I'll ask you to be jealous in silence." Julia laughed and left the room. They walked through the streets of the city. Carlo chattered incessantly. "I'm sorry I didn't come. I was sent on a business trip, so I was there all this time." He turned to her, and now he was walking ahead of her. "Why are you telling me this?" "I don't care." She made an indifferent look. "Thought you were waiting." The guy saddened. "Come on, waited a couple days." She told him the secret. "Well, I'm here, and now I'm not going anywhere." Carlo was so happy, talking all the time, laughing. "Okay." They had been outside for hours. The girl was freezing. "Shall we go to my place?" he asked her as they walked towards the dorm. "Let's not tonight." She didn't want to rush things. "Okay, whatever you say." He led her to the door, and then the young people stood opposite each other for a long time. Julia was thinking, even waiting for him to kiss her, and Carlo was in thought. He certainly wanted that kiss, but he was afraid to scare her off. They just said goodbye. The heart in the girl's chest was pounding, even pounding. She thought everyone could hear it. She had finally and irrevocably fallen in love with him. Now Carlo came for her every evening. They either went for a walk or went to his place. "Why don't you want to move? It's better in an apartment than in a dormitory." Every time he asked. "You know, I'm used to it." She was telling the truth. "Okay, I'll wait." He was stubborn. "So wait," she said, like a queen. But after New Year's Eve, the girl agreed and they started living together. "How happy I am, you can't even imagine." The guy woke up every morning. "Enough for me to talk about it. I'm happy too." She told him and kissed him after that. With her parents, Julia never communicated. She didn't think she needed to. She felt sorry for her mom. She thought she was going to get on her feet and take her in. "Why are you so sad?" Carlo had seen her like that a lot. "No, you just thought she was looking away so he wouldn't see her tears." "Well, that's your business. I won't interfere." After saying that, he climbed out from under the blanket and went to the kitchen. Julia looked at her lover and could not understand how such a chance meeting could bring her to such a wonderful man. "You don't know anything about him," her friend told her. "So what?" "I can see the man," Julia countered. "Okay, that's your business." The girl dismissed her. From that moment on, Julia stopped talking to everyone from her past circle. She gave all of herself to Carlo. "Why don't you ever talk about your parents?" Carlo asked her once. "I don't want to. I'm not doing well there." She didn't want to deceive him. "Okay, I'm not bothering you." He kissed her. One day, Julia went to the store. On the way, she met a classmate. They walked together, talking about something on the way. Carlo came home at that moment, knew where his girlfriend went out to meet her and saw this picture. "Who was that?" he asked her at home. "An acquaintance we studied together." She was sorting out bags. And why she did not pay attention to this situation, Julia still does not know. In the summer, after the first course, the young man proposed to his beloved. She, of course, agreed. "What kind of wedding do you want?" he asked her a week after the proposal. "None," she laughed. "What do you mean? You're turning me down?" You could see the guy was angry. "I just don't want it." She was honest with him. "Oh, you scared him," he exhaled. They filed the application. Julia was very worried that she couldn't tell her mom about it, but she thought she would definitely visit her sometime. After the marriage, the young people didn't go anywhere. They just went on with their lives. "We're so boring," Julia said to Carlo. "What do you miss?" he asked. "I don't know." She sat on the couch and shrugged. "If you want, you can go out," he suggested. Well, she was going to ask him about it, but she didn't have the guts. The girls had been asking her to go out for a long time, and this weekend she promised them she would. That day she came home from school and started to get dressed up. "In this skirt you will not go anywhere," stood in the doorway of the room husband. "Why?" The girl didn't understand. It wasn't short. "Because I said so." He was insistent. "Okay." She obediently changed her clothes. As Julia walked out, Carlo kissed her. said love, and closed the doors. It was so nice to get away from this domestic routine. Julia just danced. She didn't think about anything. She rested her mind and body. This evening she enjoyed her freedom. She was coming home and didn't expect what was waiting for her there. "I'm home." She entered the apartment. "Did you have a good time?" Her drunken husband came out into the hallway. "Carlo, you let me go, didn't you?" She didn't know what was going on. "Yes, I did. I thought you'd say no, that you'd spend time with me." His tongue was slurring. "What's going on?" She went into the room. There was a table by the couch, and on it were some shots and a bottle. "I'm out. As you can see, I'm having fun. Who were you with?" He grabbed her arm. "What are you doing? You're hurting me." Fear appeared in her eyes. She remembered how her father used to beat her mother when she was a child. "Oh, you," he pushed her. Julia didn't wait for him to continue. She grabbed her shoes and ran out of the apartment. She didn't know where to go. There was only one option, the dorm. "Hello, can't you let me in?" she asked the janitor. If only for a visit. She looked at the desk clerks. "Thank you." Julia began to think about what she should do. When the former roommate came out to her, she quickly told her everything, asked her to find a way out. "So here is the address. There lives my good acquaintance. Say that from me and tell everything." She gave her a piece of paper. "Thank you." The girls hugged each other. Julia was scared to go because there was a guy there again, not a girl. But she had no other choice, so she went. "Hello," they met. Julia told Michael everything. He stepped in and let her spend the night. "Thank you." She thanked him in the morning she left. She thought she would never need his help again. Just as Julia thought, Carlo found her at her studies. While they were in public, he spoke to her affectionately, asked her questions, but without pressure. At home, it started all over again. The only consolation was that he was sober. "Why do you behave like this?" Julia could not understand in her head. Such a nice and caring before the wedding. A young man became inadequate as soon as he put a ring on his finger. "And you?" He asked her a counter question. "What about me?" She looked at him. The conversation was not working. "Going everywhere, unknown with whom and where you sleep. Tell me, where were you today?" He came very close. "At a friend's." She didn't want to lie because it could be worse. "You see, at a friend's." He emphasized the last syllable. Julia went to the kitchen. She didn't want to talk. It was all empty. The girl wouldn't prove anything. Carlo didn't go after her. After that, they didn't talk for about a week. And then Carlo came home with flowers. "What's the occasion?" Julia came out into the hallway. "I'm sorry, my love. I overreacted." He handed her the bouquet. Good, she really thought, that he understood and realized everything. But it didn't last long. There was a corporate party at her husband's work. "You're coming with me tomorrow," he told her. "I have an extreme session coming up. I can't not prepare for it." She looked up at her husband. "Nothing. One evening will not decide anything. Everyone will be there with their wives," insisted the young man. "All right," Julia agreed with him. The next day, she put on a beautiful dress, painted her eyes and lips, and went out to Carlo. "Wow, what a beauty you are." He opened his arms to hug her. "Let's go already," she laughed. The evening was fun. At first, everyone was just sitting around the tables, making speeches. Then the music started, and everyone got on the dance floor. Julia tried to behave so no one would say anything to her husband. "How I envy Carlo," a representative man approached her. "Yes," Julia turned to him, a smile on her face. "Yes." At that moment, slow music played. The man held out his hand to her. She didn't refuse. They started moving to the tune. At some point, Julia saw her husband. He was standing there, all red. His jaundices were going in different directions. "I'm sorry, I have to interrupt our dance," Julia said quickly to the stranger. "What a pity." He saw her off with his eyes. "What do you think you're doing?" Boiled Carlo. He was pretty drunk again. "Beloved, calm down." She was afraid that the scandal would start right here. "Let's go home." They walked towards the exit. The man who had just danced with Julia caught up with them. "Sorry, you left it." He held out the hairpin to her. "Thank you," she smiled. At this point, the young man couldn't take it anymore. He swung around and punched the man in the jaw with all his might. The man went flying, and for some reason, the image of Billy, whom her father had dragged into the room in bloody pants, came to Julia's mind. He yelled when he saw Julia running away from him. He caught up with her, waited for a cab to pull up, put her in the car, and they drove home. As always, Carlo was silent in front of anyone, but at home, he was on the loose. "Stop!" She yelled at the whole house, but no one could hear her. "What's wrong with you?" In the morning, Carlo went into the kitchen to get a drink of water. Julia was lying on the couch. When he didn't hear an answer, he walked over. He pulled the blanket open and recoiled, sat down next to her, grabbed his head. Julia lay there, her face resembling a bloody mess. "What have I done?" Carlo went to the phone and called an ambulance. Thank God the girl was alive. They put her in the hospital. As soon as Julia felt a little better, could see and walk, without asking anyone, the girl just ran out of there. She drove home to her parents' house, thinking that if Carlo was there looking for her, her father would still intercede. Whatever their relationship, she's his daughter. "Hey," she came in the house. "What happened to your face?" Her brother asked her from the door. "Nothing." She walked up the steps to her mom's house. Julia rushed to her Inga. She first hugged and then pulled her daughter aside to look. "It can't be," she cried. "Maybe. Apparently it's fate," she cried. "Everything will be all right. Ask your father for help. He won't refuse," the mother advised. The father, when his daughter turned to him, thought of nothing better than to send her out of the country. First, they formalized their divorce, and then Julia flew abroad for a few months. As expected, Carlo arrived. It was unclear why he procrastinated so long. Inga assumed he simply hadn't visited his wife in the hospital. "Where's my wife?" He burst into the house and was immediately punched in the face. "This is my house, and only I can raise my voice here." Jack came out to him. "Where's Julia?" Carlo clamped his nose. "That's something you'll never know," said the man sternly. "What are you keeping a guest on the doorstep?" Came out to them. "Arnold, come in." They all sat together in the house. In Carlo's hands was a glass with something strong. "Tell me, what happened?" Julia's brother said. Carlo began to mutter to himself that he was jealous and drunk. He couldn't help himself. "And the last time I broke the CEO's face, I got fired, and I couldn't get over it." He looked up at them. "Yeah, the story." Jack looked at him. He didn't know what to do. "Okay, Julia's not home. Here's my card. Come on, buddy. Go home. Call me if you need anything." Arnold escorted him out of the house. Carlo drove home. He had new friends now. Inga continued her existence in the house with her husband, son, and daughter-in-law. They were communicating with the girl already openly. Jack and Arnold let the situation go. "Mom, I'm pregnant." Diane came to her room one day. "Don't tell him. Have an abortion," the woman begged her. "What are you talking about? I want this baby." Her daughter-in-law's eyes bulged. "You wanted to marry Arnold too?" The woman shook her head again. "No, I'll give him a son, and he will calm down." The girl stood her ground. As you know, Inge didn't care anymore. She was waiting for her husband to hit her someday, so that she wouldn't wake up. Diana sat in her room. She wanted to share her joy with everyone. She decided to call an old friend. "Hello, Natalie," she said into the phone. "Diana, where have you been?" She was surprised to hear from her. "I got married and now I'm expecting a baby," she bragged. "How do you feel about us coming to visit you?" asked her friend. "I don't even know." She glanced at the door. "I don't want to hear anything. We'll come to your place tonight. You can meet your husband," Natalie said. "Arnold, we're having friends over tonight," she said quietly to her husband. "What friends do we have?" He was very surprised. "Mine from school." She thought he wouldn't mind. She had to socialize with someone. "Look at me." He gave her a look that sent shivers down her spine. Diana was glad he didn't forbid it. She got ready for the evening. Jack was frowning. Something had been weighing on him lately. "What's the party?" he asked. "We have friends coming," she said cheerfully, "and yes, you'll be a grandfather soon." After these words, she thought that the man would somehow be happy, but he just looked at her and passed by. "What did you just say?" Arnold was coming down the stairs. "Yes, you're going to be a dad. I wanted to surprise you." She expected her husband to hug or kiss her, but he, like his father, didn't react in any way. The friends arrived in the evening. When Diana saw that there were young men among them, she thought her husband would not be very happy. "Wow, What a house you have. Natalie walked everywhere. Inga came down the hall. No one had warned her that there would be guests, so she was immediately embarrassed. Who's that? A startled Natalie approached her friend. The mother-in-law, she said simply. What's wrong with her face? A common question that came up to everyone who saw her for the first time. Ignore it, Diana asked her. Okay. They continued the party. After the feast, everyone moved outside. There was going to be a kebab. Diana, wow, you got the guy. He came up to her and slapped her. What are you doing? She looked back so that her husband did not see, but at that moment she ran into his gaze. Friends, thank you for coming. Arnold immediately began to speak. But we haven't cooked the meat yet. We're all upset. We'll do it another time, Arnold promised. When everyone had left, he took his wife under his elbow and they returned to the house. His father was gone, away on business. What do you think you're doing? You brought your lover into the house so you can see what a dear my husband is? He attacked her. What are you talking about? Diana already knew how it would end. Inga heard shouting downstairs, came out of her room and went there. Arnold, leave her alone. She's expecting a baby. She approached her son. What? Who's yapping? He turned to the woman. No, shouted Diana. At that moment, the young man hit his mother in the face with such force that she flew to the stairs and bumped her head. Know what? Arnold was already upset. Don't touch. She covered herself with her hands, but it was too late. You'll know how to bring men into the house. He sat down on the sofa. When neither his mother nor Diana got up from the floor, he got nervous. His father wasn't around to ask for advice. The young man stood up, walking over to the woman first, blood oozing from her head. Get up, he prodded his wife. Fuck you. Diana saw that she was bleeding too, only downstairs she understood. Fuck you. I'll go to you now. And again the shock and darkness. The woman and the girl woke up in the hospital. Inga had a severe concussion and Diana had lost her baby. What are you doing? Jack started yelling at his son. You weren't there. What was I supposed to do? The boy whined. Okay, we'll figure something out. He pulled out a briefcase. When the doctor came in to see Inge, she was lying there staring at him with empty eyes. Will you be writing a statement? He asked her. What statement? She pretended not to understand. I see. He left the room. Diana was crying. She knew she didn't want to be with this man anymore. But how to get rid of him, she didn't understand. I write a statement or we get a divorce. She gave him an ultimatum. We'll see. He wanted to say something to her, but he turned and left the room. We have to do something, Jack said to his son at home. What do you mean? Arnold didn't understand. With your mother, she's got a bad headache. She won't do anything now, the man was sure. What's the plan? The young man was ready to listen. First, you must divorce your wife. You do not need her, only problems, advised the father. Well, I was going to do that myself, he admitted. After that, find your new friend, Carlo, I think, who lived with Dashka. We will give him the most difficult task, the man said point by point. Understood, Arnold smiled. After the conversation with his father, he began to immediately put the plan into practice. First, he went and negotiated a divorce. It didn't take long. Hey, he walked into Diane's room. What do you want? She was very angry with him. Here, he put an envelope of money on the table. I filed for divorce, you're free. Here's some money for the first time. Did he say everything? She looked at him contemptuously. Yeah, he didn't even say goodbye. He just walked out of the room, that's all. After that, he looked at his mother. She was lying in bed smiling. He realized what his father was talking about. Arnold left the hospital and immediately called Carlo. An unemployed guy could use the money. You got it? He talked to him. Yes, as soon as you call, I will be at your place, promised the young man. That was the end of their agreement. It remained to wait for Inga to be discharged from the hospital. They didn't have to wait long. Not even 2 weeks later, she was already home. Hi, Jack said hello to her. She just walked past him, humming something to herself. Crazy, Arnold said it after her. Shut up, his father put his finger to his lips. In the evening, Carlo arrived. Now listen carefully, Jack began to say. Now you go to your ex-mother-in-law. Tell her you want to talk. As if you feel bad after the divorce with Dashka. Cry, bring tea. Beforehand, Dissolve this in hot liquid. No one will ever figure it out. After his words, Jack gave Carlo a capsule with a clear liquid. Do I have to kill her? The boy was frightened. Think about it. Arnold showed him a thick envelope with money. And why do you need it? Did not understand the young man. After her death, we will receive the inheritance, said Jack. I see. Carlo understood everything now. Today, he spent the night in this house, and for tomorrow the plan was to be executed. Carlo went to Inga's room after lunch. He asked if he could come in. She smiled. Hello. He entered then uninvited. Come in. She sat him on a chair. Do you remember me? I'm your daughter's ex-husband. He was nervous, and Inge sat looking at him, happiness on her face. And then Carlo started crying. How bad he felt, how tired he was, and all the other things Jack had told him. How about some tea? He asked. Wouldn't say no. She looked at him. Now he left the room. In the kitchen he did as he was told. There's our tea. He brought a tray of cups and cookies into the room. Look, I had a delicious roll in the cupboard, the woman asked. Okay, he got up, but he didn't find any roll there. Well, I have to go. They finished their tea. The young man got up from his seat and went to the door. At that moment, the woman just fell off her chair. Carlo came down the stairs. He was happy. Arnold handed him his fee. After that, he advanced home. What now? The son looked at his father. We'll wait until night and take her out into the woods, the man said. Until then, Inga lay on the floor. All evening, Arnold agonized over what would happen to them if anything came to light. But he looked at Jack and realized that if he was calm, there was nothing to worry about. When night fell, they loaded the woman's body into the car and drove away. They drove far away so that no one they knew would find her. This would be fine, Jack said. His plan was to leave the woman here and report her missing a few days later. Doctors would confirm that she was insane, left home on her own, got lost, froze, and died. That's it, we have no more burdens. The man shook off his hands. You're right, they got in the car and drove home. Early in the morning, the forester went around his property, looking to see if anything was caught in the traps. When he reached the edge of the forest, he saw a beast lying on the ground and came closer. Lord, he began to be baptized. He sat down and looked at the woman. He didn't know what to do with her. The old man pulled up his wagon. He loaded the woman into it. He was afraid that he would be blamed for the death of this unfortunate woman. He saw that on the outskirts of the city, there was a place where homeless people were fed and hot lunches were brought to them. So he decided to take the woman there. Who are you? Inga opened her eyes, and several overgrown and bad-smelling people were leaning over her. We found you here, squeaked one of them. And whom am I? She looked at her hands. She's not well at all, said an old man with a large beard. He might not have been an old man, but the look of him said so. Inga was lifted to her feet, dizzy and cold. She was shivering. Come with me. The same man held out his hand to her. Good. There was no tooth on tooth. Inge poured hot tea, so she joined the company. Don't you remember anything at all? Her new friends asked her. No, she shook her head and smiled all the time. Poor thing, everyone felt sorry for her. Everyone here was friendly. If food was brought in, pandemonium ensued. But when a cup of hot food fell into Inga's hands, she simply enjoyed it. She had a warm jacket. It was a few sizes too big, but it was so warm. Come on, a man called out to her. Apparently, he was not all right in the head either, because he kept telling everyone that he was an academician. With him, Inga began to communicate closely. They were always together, sleeping, eating. Where did you lose your fiancé? The volunteers laughed. Who brought hot lunches? None of your business, Inga answered them. Now she didn't look any different from her companions. She was wearing the same rags. It was impossible to walk in them, but no one offered her anything else. And where were you from? Sometimes Inga asked the boys, who were so kind as to pour tea and offer bread. From the city, they didn't want to talk to her. I used to live in the city too. The woman rolled her eyes. Good, but they didn't believe it. In the evening, Steve, with whom Inga was always together, offered her a bottle. Where did you get it? The woman wondered. It's not there anymore. He squinted slyly and took a sip. Come on, Inga wanted to warm up. It was winter ahead. It was getting colder. After a short conversation, Steve suggested that Inga leave this company and live alone. "Don't tell me you're taking me to your academic apartment," laughed the woman. "Look at Hugh. What kind of academic would look at Hugh?" He showed his toothless mouth as he smiled. But still, they made it. Moved closer to the city. Here you could beg by the subway and beg around caves. "Well, aren't you sorry?" Steve looked at his companion. "Soon it will be winter. What are we going to do? Go to the basement?" Inga asked him once. "Why didn't you say anything before?" "Exactly, it's warm there." The man tapped himself on the forehead. They came to one of the houses. The cellar was open, not like in many other houses. They settled there for a while. Now Inga didn't refuse when Steve brought a bottle. Once she took not one sip, but two. "What are you doing?" He poked her in the chest. "Leave me alone," the woman said in a drunken voice. "Oh, you," he pushed her. Inga collapsed on her side, lay like that. Sometimes she saw the janitor sweeping the yard, thought that she could also. Maybe they would have allocated a place for housing. But she didn't dare to come up and ask. That's how she lived with Steve. "What's up, old girl?" He coming all stinky and wet. "Where have you been?" She was very hungry. He wanted to say something else, but he took a step, stumbled, and fell. Inga came out of the cellar. It was very cold. She wrapped herself in the same jacket that she had once gotten. The woman was walking down the street. Everyone was avoiding her. She was very hungry and warm. Inga did not know how long she wandered like that. She entered some yard. She wanted to find a cellar to warm up a little. She went to the entrance. It was very slippery. Inga didn't realize how she slipped and fell to the ground. What happened next is unknown. Selena lived with her mom. She wanted to get married or at least find a young man who would take her away from home. Everything was fine until recently when her mother brought a man into the house. "Mom, he's hitting on me, peeping in the shower," complained her daughter to her. "What are you talking about?" The woman didn't believe her. She was so happy that in her old age she had met a life partner. Her daughter had grown up. She was in college. It was time to think about her own life. "Find someone else," her mother told her. "Yes, you think that someone would be waiting for me around the corner?" Selena answered her sadly. "Well, let's get you an apartment." The woman offered the last argument she had. "You what? Where is the money from?" was surprised daughter. Lenia said he would help, she parried. "Well, if he helps, then I agree finally. Her dream will come true, and she will live alone." As soon as the girl moved out, she began a completely different life. Now she could eat or not eat. Before her mother pointed it out, bring her friends to visit, and everything else. "Selena, you've blossomed," Mickey, who she had liked for a long time, told her. Like? She wanted him to go out with her or come and visit. Yeah, he didn't ask or say anything else. He just stood there silent. "Come and visit me," she plucked up the courage. "Why, and I will come," he revived. "So I'm waiting for you tonight," she blushed. At home, Selena cooked unpretentious dishes, expecting that the guy would come hungry, because students are all like that. And so he did. "Hi," he stood there glowing like a new dollar. "Come in," she greeted him cordially. The young people went to the kitchen. There the girl immediately began to put dishes on a plate. After that, they moved to the room. "Wow, you have parents, Kata rented?" He looked around. "Yes, the mother did not want me to disturb her, did not want to talk about it, girl." "I see," he turned to her. "Why didn't you notice me before?" she asked him bluntly. "Did you see what you were wearing?" "I did, but in a different way," he laughed. "Fool," she turned away. "Do not be offended. I understand that you live with your mother. Most likely, it is her merit." He stopped laughing and put his hand on the back of the sofa so that a little touched the girl. "Okay, let's watch a movie. I made beer and chips." She got up, went to the fridge and brought everything to the table. The evening was very heartwarming. Selena realized that she liked him for a reason. He was exactly what she needed in her life. The next day, Mickey was again at the girl's house. I missed him. She met him in a funny homemade suit. And me, he handed her a teddy bear. "Why did you spend the money? Already probably not enough." She hugged him. At that moment, the guy pulled her against him. She looked up, and at that moment, Mickey started kissing her. From that day on, the lovers never parted again. "Are you going to school?" she asked him. "No, I don't want to." He stretched his hands to her, and when they made contact, the girl found herself in bed with the guy, and they weren't going anywhere together today. "We can't do this. We're in our final year. We have to get our diplomas at any cost," Selena said. "Nothing is going to happen over one day." Mickey kissed her. It felt so good, so warm in his arms. She watched and couldn't believe they were really together. "Why don't we go visit your mom?" Mickey suggested it. "Are you ready to propose?" She was happy. "Why not?" "Not yet, though." He wasn't looking her in the eye. "What's the matter?" The girl didn't understand. "No, just," he spread his hands. Selena didn't want to take Mickey's mom to visit unannounced. She'd called, said they were coming over. Her mother had gotten excited. Then the girl let Mickey know about it. How exciting they were going. "I don't see what the big deal is," she shrugged. "Hello." They entered the house where the girl's mother lived. "Hurry, things would soon get cold." The mother was waiting for them. Richard was already sitting at the table. He was smiling. "Well, what, daughter, are you going to get married?" her mother asked her. "Wait, we haven't finished our studies yet." Selena made a serious face. "It's okay. You'll get your diplomas, get a job, and then you'll start renting an apartment yourself, and you'll get married," the woman reasoned. To be honest, Selena didn't expect anything else from her. She looked sadly at the woman who had loved her as a child, strictly brought her up in her youth, and now what? That Richard had come along and everything had gone to shit. "We should probably go." The girl stood up. She looked at Mickey. "Where to?" "We haven't tried anything yet." You could see that the guy was getting into the confidence of his future mother-in-law. "There, you see, the guy says smart things." Got the mother on his side. "Good." Sat back down Selena. After that, it was only Mickey who talked at the table. He talked about his academic success and everything else. In the evening, they finally left the apartment. "Why did you want to go and visit them?" Selena wondered. "Just to get acquainted." It seemed like he was really telling the truth. Well, they came home. There was no mood to talk about anything. As time went on, school continued. Things with Mickey became monotonous. Before, they were always going out having fun, but now they were just sitting at home. "Mickey, we used to have fun together at home," she told him. "What's different now?" He didn't understand. That was it. She couldn't help herself. That evening, the guy got up and left. Selena cried, tried to call him, but he didn't answer. What was going on in her life? Why was she like this? She'd gone from being a kind, helpful girl to some kind of freak. She thought it over, and the next day, while studying, Selena approached Mickey. "I'm sorry," I snapped. "It's all come up, Mom, the house parties." She stood in front of him guilty. "Come here, I'm sorry too." He hugged her. From that moment on, they had a different relationship. By graduation, the guy proposed to Selena. He became something else altogether. He'd go out at night, come back late. Selena felt sorry for him, thought he was depressed. Congratulations, she kissed her husband-to-be, both holding diplomas. And he was happy. A very different happy life was beginning, Selena thought. But it turned out that this happiness was only her own idea. "When are we going to apply?" she asked Mickey. "I don't know. You want to do it tomorrow," he shrugged. Selena looked at him. He was always sad. Nothing was working out for him, or he didn't want to do anything. She found a job quickly. The pay was good. The staff was normal. "That's it. There is nowhere to pull. Let's go to the registry office." One evening, she said to him. "Come on," he followed her like a dog. "Mickey, I can't take it anymore. Tell me what's going on." She couldn't understand it. "It's okay." That's all he answered her. "I can see something's happened to you." Selena stopped in the middle of the street. She didn't go anywhere that day. "Mashka, hi, can I come over?" she called her friend. Of course, she agreed. That evening, Selena and Maria sat in her kitchen and drank wine. The girl told and told. She was crying. She couldn't stop. "What are you so killed? Sit down and talk." The friend was incomprehensible. "What is difficult about it?" "He doesn't talk to me, you know." Selena raised her tearful eyes. She got home late. Mickey was already asleep. The girl lay down next to her. Cats were scratching at her soul. That day started as usual, but how it would end, the girl could not even guess. "Selena, we need to talk to you," Mickey told her at breakfast this morning. "It's about time." She looked at him. "I'm leaving," he said. "What?" She even got up from her chair. "I have another." He lowered his eyes to the floor. Mickey, don't lie to me. Tell me what's wrong with our relationship. She couldn't believe it. The night you and I had our fight and I left, I met a girl at the bar. I don't know how it happened. We were drinking heavily. We went to her house. That's where it happened. After that, she started calling. I answered. He told it like he was being interrogated. So, if you don't want to, you don't have to be with her, do you? She couldn't understand what was happening. She was dizzy. She's having my baby, he said at the end. God, how could this happen? Selena cried. Mickey was packing his things, and Selena was getting ready for work. She was walking down the street, and she didn't realize how just like that, in an instant, her happy life had been blown to pieces. At the office, she went up to her floor. Her co-worker friends were there, all friendly. They were acting strangely that day. Selena, come in to see me, her boss called out to her. Yeah, she came to see her. You see, there is a redundancy and I have to fire you because you are new, you have just arrived, said the boss, and Selena's ears were ringing so loudly that she couldn't listen anymore. She gathered her things, which weren't much, and went home. It was cold outside, but she didn't feel it. When she approached her driveway, she saw a homeless woman lying in the snow. At first the girl passed by. She didn't want to get involved, but when she entered the entrance, she stopped. And it's me, she said out loud. Today, I was thrown out on the street like that, first by a guy and then at work. She turned around, walked out of the entrance, and approached the poor guy. Can you stand up? She leaned over her. When the woman did not answer, she dragged her into the entranceway, which she managed with difficulty. The snow was easy, but then the hard part began. Selena was exhausted to the point of tears, but she did it. The woman was warm now. I hope you are doing well. She got up and walked. She heard the woman moan. Are you very sick? Said the girl and took a few more steps. Help, said the homeless woman to her. And where did all this come from today? She came back. Can you get up? Again she repeated her. She realized that she could not drag her to the floor. Give me your hand. Inga couldn't open her eyes. Everything was spinning in front of her. Get up. Selena grabbed the railing so she had a foothold and gave her other hand to the woman. She somehow got up. Selena, overcoming her disgust, led the tramp to her home. I'll do a good deed. Maybe karma will get better, she said aloud. At home, she put the old woman on a chair and brought her some water. When the woman took off her shoes, the landlady plugged her nose. God, when was the last time you bathed? She asked rhetorically. Is there anything hot to eat? The woman asked. Now come in. The girl even liked the whole situation. Now she would come home, would be alone, crying, suffering, remembering, and so, at least some company and no time to think. Inga took off her jacket, which had grown attached to her, and followed the girl. Here, the soup, yesterday cooked, she said, and then thought that she probably ate worse, smiled. Inga ate the soup as if she had never tasted anything better in her life. Take your things off, I'll throw them away and find you something else, Selena asked, because when they got into the warmth, they started to smell so fragrant it made her eyes water. Wow. She saw the scars on the tramp's body. You've been through a lot. Don't mind her. Inga was standing in front of her completely naked. Who did that to you? Selena got up, went to the room, brought a robe, but did not give it back, but made the old woman go to wash herself. Why did you let me in? Inga asked the girl. I could steal something from you. Take it. She waved her hands. No, I don't need anything. Thanks for everything. Can I have my jacket back? She got up from the chair. No, I will not let you go anywhere. The landlady realized that today in this woman she found salvation from her suffering. You have a husband, children. How will they understand all this? Asked Inga. I have no one. At this point, all the pain came to her throat, and she burst into tears. Don't. Inga wanted to approach her, but she understood that she could be unpleasant to this young person. It was all right, and she began to pour out what had happened to her. Everyone's life is hard, Inga said. Yes, I would never have thought that this could happen to me. The girl sobbed one last time. It seemed that all the resentment that was there came out with those tears. Maybe I should go after all, Inga asked. No, stay. Live a little. Tell me your story. It will be easier. At some point in her head, a stray thought flashed through her mind. What if she just lacks a caring mom who could listen to her in the kitchen and feel sorry for her? Thank you. You're a very kind person, the woman said. Selena made her a bed on the floor and lay down on the bed herself. They did not speak again that evening. Both were exhausted. They went to bed. In the morning, Selena didn't need to be anywhere else. She got up and smelled the smell from the kitchen. "What are you doing here?" She walked in and saw the cheesecakes on the table. She took one, and though it was very hot, she took a bite. "Eat. Don't hurry," said the woman gently. "Who brought you here?" laughed the girl. "I don't know, and you to me?" Inga sat down opposite her. "We didn't even get acquainted with you yesterday," the landlady said. "My name is Inga," said the woman. "And I'm Selena. Tell me what happened to you," she asked. "It's a very long story," sighed the guest. "I don't need to go anywhere. I'm in no hurry. I think you are too," laughed Selena. "Okay," nodded the one. "It started a long time ago." How long? Selena began to speculate in her mind. If she looks like that, then how many years has she been suffering? "Not as long as you might think." Inga smiled softly. "Okay, I'm listening," nodded her interlocutor. "About 30 years ago," gave out the woman and looked at the girl's reaction. "What, you were young then? So you are not so many years old. Why then?" She shut her mouth with her hand. "I met my future husband," she began to tell, and got to the point where he came back from prison. "What, straight cut off?" The girl looked with big eyes. "I don't know. I didn't go into details. Only after that I had hell on earth. As soon as my husband and son did not mock me," she tilted her head. A stingy tear rolled from her eye. "And how did you survive all this?" The girl was silent. "I don't know. I even tried to hang myself, but I didn't have the will," she said, asking him to let me go, but Jack kept me at home like a slave. "And then it happened that my son attacked his wife. I interceded. He pushed me away, hit my head, ended up in the hospital." Terrible. Those were the only words Selena said. But for me, it was a step to salvation. When I woke up, I pretended like something was wrong and I didn't understand anything. I smiled all the time and did things I didn't understand. At home, they stopped taking me seriously, didn't pay attention to me, and I just needed it. She was getting angry with every word, so she was angry at the men in her family. "I see," Spinall rubbed her hands. "Yes, so they planned to get rid of me. They were discussing the plan. I wanted to come down at that moment. I heard it and froze. My ex-brother-in-law was going to poison me. I prepared myself. While he was in my room, I switched the capsule in his pocket for an ordinary sleeping pill. When I drank tea, of course, I fell down. They thought the deed was done." Inga stopped, drank tea, looked at Selena. "And what next?" She was already so engrossed that she was interested in everything else. "I, of course, do not know it, but I can guess. I was taken to the forest. Imagine my own son. Okay, husband, but a bloodline. I do not understand. I woke up from the cold, heard footsteps, got scared, pretended to be unconscious again. A man came over. I was so afraid he would take me to the hospital. They would find out who I was and bring me back to that wretched house again," she sobbed. "Yes, that's quite a story," Selena marveled. "But he turned out to be a coward, scared of something, took me to the tramps that lived on the outskirts, and then I had to play amnesia. The people who brought the food were always asking around. What was their name, to help them find relatives, and I didn't want that. Let it be with vagrants, but I'm free. No one pokes me. No one commands me." She stopped again to drink tea. "How did you end up here? It's far from the outskirts." Selena was already head over heels in that story. "To be honest, it's not a good story. I don't want to tell it. I'm disgusted. You saw what I was like when I came here." She looked at her new acquaintance. "Stay here. I won't tell anyone about you," said Celine. "I need your help," Inga asked. "Sure, whatever you want." The girl turned to listen. "Need a good lawyer," I later, "but I can pay." Waited for an answer after this question. "I have one acquaintance." She remembered about Richard, Mom's boyfriend. He was just engaged in legal affairs. "If you help me, you won't regret it," the woman said. "All right, I'll try to talk him into it," the girl promised her. After that, everyone went about their business. Selena left the house after a couple of hours, and Inga just sat in an armchair and read a book. She thought everything over. The main thing was to get help, because Jack could do a lot. "He agrees." Selena came home. "What did you tell him?" Inga wondered. "Nothing of what you told me. Just pressed on pity, admitted the girl. Well then, the war begins, clenched her fist the one who had been bullied all her life. There was so much anger at the native people that even words cannot express. Richard, when he came to visit, he doubted for a long time that this client would be able to pay him. But he liked the story so much that he decided to take the case. You and I will file a statement, indicate there that they abused you, tried to kill you, and everything else, asked the man. Yes, that's right, she agreed with him. Do you have any witnesses to any of this? It was important. Yes, the ex-sister-in-law. The doctors can give extracts with all the references. Inga began to enumerate. Great, consider it a done deal, he snapped his fingers. The case had begun, but Jack and Arnold didn't know it yet. After they took the mother and wife out into the woods, they waited a few days to report them missing. When this happened, the son began to tell them that his mother, with her sick head, kept asking to be taken to one place or another. He was asked to show these places. First, they went to the market, then somewhere else, and the third object was the forest. But no matter how many times they looked, there was no body. Did the wolves eat her? Arnold wondered when he talked to his father. Nothing. Soon time will pass, they will consider her missing, and we will still get the inheritance, his father reassured him. Of course, without a death certificate, no one would give them anything. They lurked and waited for the time to pass when the woman would be reported missing. Why don't you find out anything? Arnold was nervous. Why should I go to the trouble? His father didn't understand. Their hands were tied now. They had to sit quietly to keep themselves uncovered. The doorbell rang. Jack got up and went to open it. On the threshold stood a solid man. Hello, my name is Richard. I represent your wife Inga. He said everything at once. What wife? She disappeared a few months ago. The man stood looking at him. I don't know. Here is her statement. She instructed me to sue you and to handle the case. The lawyer spoke politely. I don't understand anything. Come in. You could see how the hands of the master of life trembled. Here, you can familiarize yourself with everything here. He held out a folder with documents to Jack. Arnold was curious too, so he came over. It's all the ravings of a madman, he said. My wife has been having trouble with her head lately. That's not true, and the doctors can confirm that she's fine. He pulled out a certificate. What's going on here? The man turned to his son. He only shrugged his shoulders in response. Well, I've notified you. The lawsuit has been filed. Wait for the summons. I don't advise you to run away. Richard smiled before leaving. And what, tell me, what were their faces like? Celine couldn't wait for the man. Though she disliked him, it didn't matter now. What do you think? He laughed. Can you imagine? They are sitting waiting for the inheritance to pass into their hands. And then on top of that, the lawsuit, laughed the girl. Stop it. He who laughs well, said Inga. She sat and listened to Richard. She had the same joy in her soul, but she was not used to show it. Great. I think we're in a winning position. The man said goodbye to them and drove home. He's nice, Inga said. And what he takes you all for, snorted the girl. They waited for the lawyer to call. The woman needed clothes to look decent at the trial. Selena decided to splurge. She trusted the lady. The hearing was scheduled in a month. When Jack saw Inga, his eyes almost popped out of his orbits. She wasn't as beautiful as she used to be, but she held herself with pride. Mother, how can you slander your own son? Arnold shouted at her. And when you beat and humiliated her, did you think about it? Selena put in her word. Who are you? Who are you anyway? You've got your mom's money, so you made it all up. They shouted until they were stopped. Richard was the one who had it all in his hands. The men were sentenced to 12 and 13 years. They kept their heads down and sat like that for the rest of the trial. I'll get out. I'll kill you. Jack turned to her and gestured it all away. No way, Selena reassured Inga. Arnold was crying. He didn't want to go there at all. He was weak, especially, and his father wouldn't be around. True to form, whispered his mother as he walked past her. By the way, why didn't you mention Carlo, your son-in-law? Selena asked her when they were already out. He was a pawn like many in their game, the woman muttered. What will you do now? The girl asked. Invite you to visit me. Inga was happy. They had come to this big house that she had dreamed of so much when she was young. Now she hated the place. Wow, Selena walked around admiring it. Baby, Don't you think you're getting fat? Or is it something else? The woman asked her. The girl stopped, she thought, counting to herself. It can't be. She looked at the woman as if the woman had told her some universal secret. We should get it checked out, Inga advised her doctor. As Selena left, she would be gone for hours. The woman sat down at the phone. Julia, hi, she dialed her daughter's number. Mommy, you can't imagine how much I've missed you, she cried into the phone. Come home, now everything is calm here, said and smiled the mistress of a huge fortune. With pleasure, but I'm not alone, she stopped talking. Okay, I'll accept anyone, laughed Mom. After that, she did not calm down and called Diana. You? She couldn't believe her ears. Can you come over? Her ex-mother-in-law asked her. I'm not going to your house anymore. The girl began to refuse. Come now, it's my house, reassured her Inga. If so, then wait, promised Diana. Selena returned happy. Even if it's just a small piece of Pasha's life, she said to her new good friend. Will you stay? The woman asked her. What are you suggesting? The girl couldn't believe it. Soon all my dear people will gather. You will give birth. A grandchild will appear. She touched her stomach. I had to pick up a homeless woman in my yard. Selena couldn't believe it. What's the big deal? Kindness is always reciprocated with kindness. Inga hugged her. They began to clean the huge house, which had not been cleaned for many years. A lot of things had been thrown out, rearranged. And let's make separate rooms for everyone, the landlady suggested. What do you mean? The girl didn't understand her. A nursery for the baby, a bedroom for my daughter with a young man, a boudoir for my former daughter-in-law, and for you too. Inga was glad that now she could do everything here as she wanted. I don't believe in all this at all, was still fascinated by Selena. Richard and his wife were also invited to celebrate the housewarming. Julia came with her fiancé. The latter took along a friend who had dreamed of seeing Russia all his life. Diana was also here when Inga told her everything. She couldn't believe it, that it was true. Selena, can I talk to you? Michael said in very bad Russian. Yes, what did you want? She turned and walked over to him. Why you? He corrected her. Okay, she blushed. You are very beautiful, he complimented her and led her into the garden. Are you asking to stay here in our country? She was joking. What? He didn't understand her. No reason. I'm joking, laughing, she smiled. You'll make a good couple, she approved of Michael's choice. Well, how are the rooms? Selena couldn't wait to find out, because she'd done everything with her own hands. Great, especially mine, Diana smiled. Here's what I want to tell you, friends, stood up from the seat Inga. All invited here can stay here to live. I will not interfere. It's embarrassing, said Diana. It's okay. You've suffered so much for my son. You need to live like in paradise, said her former mother-in-law. What about you? Richard asked Selena. While Michael is here, I'll stay, and then we'll see. They held hands. Look how two people could make so many people happy. They should have just disappeared. The woman laughed. They sat back down at the table and talked and laughed for a long time more. Selena stayed to live with Inga. Things worked out well for them with Michael. When he found out that the girl was pregnant, at first he was frightened. How could it be possible? Because they only kissed. In fact, he was so funny. For a while, they went to this place to make the documents and then came back. Here we go, Selena screamed in the middle of the night. A car arrived quickly and the girl was taken to the maternity hospital. A large number of people waited outside the hospital to see how it would go. I never thought that my daughter would have such a big family, her mother said. She finally realized that she had behaved wrongly. Look, Richard pointed at the girl in the white coat who was coming toward them. What? Who? The customers started clamoring. I congratulate you. You have a grandson, a son, a nephew. She moved her gaze from one person to another. Thank you, Selena. Congratulations. They all started shouting together. Now you better go home and tomorrow morning come back. The young mother needs to rest, the nurse advised them. Okay, see you tomorrow. Everyone went to Inga's house. It didn't matter that it was night. Now this group was so united, stronger than some family ties. My dears, I invite you to the table. They entered the hall of the big house.